Unless there are any amendments to the agenda, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented from October 13th? Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. We did receive emails from some individuals with respect to the airport fees and charges. Do we want to discuss that, or do we want to refer that to another meeting?
At this point, I believe they're just open for discussion, so we'll just discuss them rather than refer.
And then I would make a motion that we add that to the agenda.
Do I have a second? Councillor Butler. Councillor Butler.
Oh, very good. I'm just wondering, can we not just discuss the letter when we come to that section of the agenda, because the fees and charges bylaw is at the end of this agenda?
Yeah, we're rid of the sticky, don't need to amend the agenda for that.
Okay, then I'll withdraw my motion.
So we can have a motion to adopt the agenda of October 13th as presented. Councillor Butler, Councillor Thompson. All in favor? So carried. Moving along to our presentations from staff, Manager of Development and Engineering Services, and the subject matter is Valley Heights Development's application for strata conversion. Will the manager be presenting it?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So we received an application for a strata conversion for the building located at 7330 Riverside Drive. It is the 3 commercial units and 4 residential units. The property is designated as commercial core. The building was built prior to 1972, so it's a legally non-conforming building. The applicants have submitted the required information as per the Strata Act, which one of the items that was submitted was the rental vacancy rate. Now, this application is a few years old. The applicant ran into a few issues that he needed to rectify before we could bring this forward to council. We have since spoken to a realtor, and the current vacancy rates are at 0%. Any questions?
Thank you. So the recommendation is, may I have a motion that council approves strata conversion application? Councillor Crock, do I have a second there? Councillor Butler. Any discussion? Councillor Butler.
I just wanted to say the building looks beautiful down there, and they've done a wonderful job fixing up that area, so thank you so much for helping our town to look great.
So all in favor of the motion? So carried. Moving on to our next item, Manager of Development Engineering Services. It's in regards to the application for development variance permits to request the increase in the ratio of apartments to the principal building from 30% to 50% to allow for the current 4 apartment upstairs remain and to comply with the zoning bylaw. Again, to our Manager of Engineering.
Yeah, so this is the same property at 7330 Riverside Drive. Again, it's a legally non-conforming building, and this variance would be to allow the ratio to be from 30% to 50% in the event that the building was to burn beyond 75% of the footprint.
Thank you. So may I have a motion to accept? Councillor Butler. Second, Councillor Crog. Any discussion? All in favor? So carried.
Mr. Mayor, this may be a good opportunity for council to talk about and asking for a report to come forward to council to consider expanding that all through the downtown core from 30% residential above the businesses to 50% and let the impact be in the downtown core. It does promote the growth of the downtown core and provide more rental units, but it wouldn't be on the main floor, but this is a report that can come forward. So council might want to consider having that discussion if they want to see that.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I would put forward a motion that we request staff to come back with a report on allowing 50% residential in downtown Clark.
May I have a second, Councillor Butler? We want to entertain any discussion on this, Councillor Butler?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. If we have 0% vacancy rate, we definitely need more rental units. And I'm not even sure why we need a report on this, or council just want to take time to consider it. Staff reports can be expensive. So I'm just wondering if we could just take some time to think about it and then maybe bring it forward on the next agenda.
Or CEO?
Mr. Mayor, there would be a bunch of impacts that would need to be considered as part of this. One of the things we'd want to talk about, just for an example, would be parking. What would that look like? What is the overall impact to development downtown? Is there any changes there? The manager of operations or manager of engineering and development would develop a report that would give council the opportunity to allow us to go and speak to the community in respect to that too. There may be some interest to have some community impact or input. But if council decided that they didn't want to have that, it would be there wouldn't be a rush on this type of report, because it would be something that would develop over the winter months and then come forward as a spring type of project.
Again, would a report be required, though, because by having passed this motion, we've already set a precedent?
I think it would be worthwhile for council to understand the dynamics that are related to it. I think just for council to be informed. I would just hate to see us make too quick of a decision on something like this without having all the information. We've had this for the first time we've had the application. So you've set the precedent and it is in place, but it would be important for us to understand, what are the impacts? We might think that we know what they all are, but there may be further that some of the businesses might not want to have, that we want to make sure that we see some the pros and cons.
Councillor Butler?
So just for clarity then, this would be a staff report and it wouldn't be farmed out to a consulting firm? Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So may I have that motion, please, Councillor Thompson?
Yes, I would, my motion, I believe, was to request staff to prepare a report for council on the impact of allowing 50% residential units in the downtown core.
So if there's no further discussion, all in favor of that motion? So carried. You're moving along to our monthly highlight reports from department managers. Recommendation is staff request for council to receive the monthly activity reports from department managers. Are we actually going to have the reports?
Mr. Mayor, if you would like me to go through them, I could. If not, we can just receive them for information if there's and answer any questions if they understand.
Does council wish to have the reports brought forward, or do we just want to receive? Councillor Butler?
Do we need to make a motion to receive before we ask questions?
Yes.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Second, Councillor Thompson. Okay, debate. Councillor Butler?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to our manager of operations, there's been talk again on Facebook from people along 68th Avenue having water that's brown and smelling like sewer. This has been an ongoing issue in that area, and I guess it hasn't been addressed yet. I'm just wondering what we're planning on doing about it.
Mr. Reed?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just suggest that the homeowners that are finding this put it in writing so that we can track where. This is actually the first that I've heard of this.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to our CAO, there's been reports that the water meters in some of the houses have been leaking and are being replaced by our City Works crews. I'm just wondering how this impacts our warranty on them. First of all, do we have a warranty? And if so, why has the installer not been required to replace the meters?
So,
Mr. Allen?
Mr. Mayor, so the meters are under warranty. We held back a security from the installation company and when Neptune was doing installations. So we're now, actually it's now, we're paying. The holdback that we have is paying for
And the warranty is for 2 years, right?
I believe so. I don't, 1 year warranty?
No, there was an amendment on it. It's 2 years.
Okay.
Any other questions? Councilor Butler?
Just with the homeless camps along the riverbanks that are being removed, I've heard that there's some up at the end of Riverside and that the walkway along the river there is being used as a corridor for B&Es. The people's stuff is getting stolen along there. So I'm just wondering if we've removed the camps at the end of Riverside Drive.
Mr. Allen?
Mr. Mayor, our bylaw services are out dealing with that. Those are in federal and provincial jurisdiction, while being in the high water mark. The conservation officers are busy right now dealing with their and animal complaints. And further, that we're taking a very sensitive approach to the removals due to the what happened the last time when the one fellow that was removed, his reaction to it. So that was a situation where City Hall was vandalized. So we're dealing with the issues. We're trying to deal with the proper agencies. We've been talking with IHA and the RCMP about how to correctly handle these situations because of the issues that people may be dealing with in those locations. So we are active on those files. It's going to be moving at a slower pace. If there is B&Es, that would be directed to the RCMP.
Thank you. Councilor Butler?
One more question. Says we had a cemetery audit from Consumer Protection BC. I just don't know what that is. Can you explain?
Mr. Allen?
To our manager of operations.
Our Chief Financial Officer?
Hi, thank you.
Oh.
Hi. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We get this audit every couple of years. Just someone from Consumer Protection comes in and makes sure we're following all the rules according to the Cemetery Act. We passed.
Thank you. Any other questions or concerns? The lady in the second.
I'm Donna Semenoff. This is regarding residents finding needles that were used for drugs on city property and wondering what council would like these residents to do. I don't know how many instances, but this is something that's been on Facebook and people are concerned about safety. Also, in whatever is done, they do, they are compassionate, understanding these people maybe who are doing this have challenges, but they're wanting safety. I'm wondering, is there a place that a central place you would like people to report to be aware of where things are being found, how often?
Has there been any documented
Yes.
files submitted?
I don't know to the city, but there is material on Facebook where 2 different people have posted things.
If the city's going to react, they need to notice.
Okay. So you would like them to write the city then and give the details? And
To our CEO.
Mr. Mayor, if we we would recommend that people don't handle used needles. We would recommend that they call into the city works and provide the area of concern, so we can get out there and remove those, because there is a proper process for handling them and disposing of them. So we would recommend that, Mr. Mayor.
Does that answer the question?
yes, thank you.
So any other questions or concerns?
One more, sir. The section on page 57, it's talking about working on water meter assessments. So I was wondering, has the city determined which companies may do indoor installations and pit meter installations? And if so, estimated costs? And if any contracts have been signed?
Our Manager of Operations, Mr. Reed, would you like to answer that question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're right in the middle of both processes for the inside meters and the pit meter installations. We put out a request for expression of interest for the inside pit meter or the inside meter installations. We did have 3 companies come forward. We gave them a sample batch of 5 each, and we're just going through the results. We had certain criteria. We'll be scoring them and And then we'll be putting out a notice to better get a cost estimate from the 3 plumbers that did the installations. We're going through the same with the pit meters right now. Both proponents that were interested in the RFP have been given 15 sample locations. So they're going to do a test batch, and once we have all that information, I'll present that to council.
You had mentioned at the last meeting that there was 3, and that since then it's come to my attention that apparently there's only 2 because one has withdrawn. Is that correct? And if so, who are they?
One did withdraw, but we had another one come on board. So there's Jedal Plumbing, there's Dandy, and there's Main Street Mechanical.
Thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Okay, this will be the last call.
This is the last one. We were accepting requests regarding fiber optics. And so they're putting fiber optics into Vancouver. People who are concerned about RF exposure have an interest in fiber optics. We're wondering if our city could communicate with TELUS. I understand TELUS is doing some investing in the city. If it's possible, electrical, water meters, whatever the choices are, that they be put in with fiber optic. And I wanted to mention this before any contracts are signed, because this might be one way to have concerns in an affordable way for the residents and the city. And so my request is, would you please consider communicating with TELUS about that possibility?
Thank you for that. To the gentleman in the back.
Yes, my name is Donald Ferran. Again, it's on the water meters. When the water meter program was initiated, what was the life cycle predicted for the water meters program?
We'll direct that to one of our managers or to our CEO.
Mr. Mayor, the assets are based on life cycling will be for council to determine in our asset management plan on the life cycling. There'll be an engineering recommendation that will be put forward. The engineers will provide a conservative life cycle when it comes to all of our assets. So right now, I would say that would be in the neighborhood of 30 years, depending on the risk the council would like to take. So when we talk about council taking risk in relation to that, it would be, staff will bring back a report saying that we feel as though this number of meters is starting to underread or overread, and it would develop our own life cycling of those water meters. So at this point right now, Mr. Mayor, we're going to say, I'm going to estimate that 30 years unless the manager of operations has.
Yeah, they suggested
20. I would say 30. I mean, from a plumbing perspective, we know that this is affected too by water conditions. We know that some water is more acidic or more alkaline. That can have an effect on it. Anodes or electrolysis can have an effect on it. So there's all kinds of different effects on the water meters. One of the things we do have is positive in our community is we have a very balanced water system when it comes to pressure. So we're not going to see a lot of fluctuating pressure that would have an impact on it. So I would say right now, I'd recommend it to council about 30 years.
But being a mechanical device, I mean, it's a given.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
A follow-up on that. If the life cycle is predicted to be 30 years, and right now we understand from the numbers that have come out to the public that each meter is costing about anywhere from $500 to $700 if we divide the number of meters installed by the total cost of the project. I question why management would go into a major investment for the life cycle of the meters on 30 years, but only have a 2-year warranty on the meters themselves. So if all the meters are dead after 5 years, it means that we have to reinvest in purchasing meters. And I quote from Asset Management BC, if you would allow me, on this kind of investment, is that there's a rule of the 20-80% rule of thumb on investments. And suppose delivery of a desired new service will require a $2 million investment. The rule of thumb says that $8 million will be required for operations and maintenance throughout the life cycle. So I would like to know from the Chief Financial Officer, when this was worked out according to the Asset Management BC Bible, what was the predicted operations and maintenance throughout the life cycle of 30 years?
Mr. Mayor.
To our CEO.
Mr. Mayor, in relation to that question, it's a lot more broad in context than the one point that the gentleman is speaking of. He's actually speaking about operations and maintenance of a facility. When we're talking about this, when it comes to assets of this nature, it is broader reaching than just the one particular asset. We talk about water mains, we talk about firefighting capacity, we talk about reservoir capacity, we talk about sewage treatment plant impacts. So we're talking a broad spectrum of asset impact. So, Mr. Mayor, what I would just suggest is that from Asset Management BC's perspective, absolutely right. We want to be considerate of the investments that we're making. But when we make an investment of this type, it is not done with a taken in light context. This type of asset installation is impacts our community in multiple jurisdictions of water and sewer and infrastructure. We're talking a $50 million business that we have when it comes to our water and sewer business, and this water conservation piece will provide a substantial impact to those utilities. So to be able to speak to that one term, I can't speak to that in just one context because it reaches out into so many different areas of the community.
Yes, sir.
But Mr. Mayor, because of the questions this investment has raised, I would expect that the financial aspect of the investment would have been looked at over a 30-year period. I can understand there's a lot of rhetoric around such projects, but definitely I'm certain the Chief Financial Officer looked at the numbers. All I'm asking to see is the spread of 30 years, how the water meter investment is a sound one.
You're asking a question on a hypothetical question because nobody can predict what's going to happen in 30 years and what the longevity of any predictions or warranties are.
But there's always projections when you're making investments. And I want to know what the projections were for the city of Grand Forks.
So there are other things in life too. But I will get directed to our CEO again.
So, Mr. Mayor, one of the things we're doing right now is I'm going to go into the report of our asset management plan. We also spoke with the province and the minister responsible last 2 weeks ago in respect to this. The water metering component is part of our overall assets. So we're going to speak to this in general terms. Like I said before, it is not one specific unit that we're speaking about because this relates to all of the assets that are impacted on this. So when we talk about this, measuring the value of water in this respect works in reverse, is saying, so what is the value of water then? When we're talking about the conservation aspects that were created this summer when we're in drought and we're expecting more drought. So, Mr. Mayor, when it comes to the measuring this, there's 3 pillars as well that we're going to be considering. There's the social, the environmental, and the financial impact. And we're going to talk about a little bit more about this in context in the next report. And then maybe that'll help the customer or the citizen of Grand Forks in his water meter issue, that we can deal with this in relation to his issue when it comes to his home. And he'll understand where his investment dollars when it comes to the taxation of Grand Forks is affected. So that's what I'm hoping that he'll help him understand.
That's satisfactory.
No, but that's the answer I got. Thank you.
So unless there's any other questions or concerns, all in favor of the motion? So carried. Motion was to receive the monthly reports. On to questions. Chief Administrative Officer, subject matter is the draft of the Asset Management Financial Plan. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So one of the things that's happened over the last little while is we've been moving into the 2016 budget. We want to make sure the council's aware of all the impacts that we're dealing with and understanding when they're asking for different infrastructure to be addressed. We're planning the finances over the next, basically over the next 10, 15, 20, and on to the 100 years beyond this. What we've identified in Grand Forks is we've been living beyond our financial means when it comes to all of our specific assets. And we're going to walk through this report and we're going to help answer some of the questions that may come up. But ultimately, one of the things is it's nobody's fault in this room that this has happened when it comes to this, because as a community, we didn't understand where we were until 2011. And in 2011, council decided to, the council of the day, actually just a little bit prior to that, decided to understand where they were from a financial perspective. And what has come up of this is we started to really narrow this down to 100 years of infrastructure that's been invested into our community and the impacts of that infrastructure and the impacts and the burden that's going to be on the taxpayer, the residents of Grand Forks. One of the things we've identified is we've got it down, we have critical needs right now that we have to address. And the critical needs would be the water main that crosses the river that provides fire protection to our major industry, and the other one that's imminent on us right now that we can see is the sewage treatment ponds are filling up. We provide a series of services in our community it's a massive amount of services that we get, and we really look at for all the different things that we get for our taxes. This is what we have when it comes to our assets. So our assets are telling us that we have a wide variety of infrastructure that looks at things from a social, environmental, economic, and environmental manner in the need for the needs of the residents. And that's what council is always tasked with: is when do they make that decision? When does the social part come in? When does the economic piece come in? And when is the environmental situation going to be impacted by that? The environmental is above and beyond what council would generally make, but council makes some environmental decisions when it comes to these things. So we're responsible for many different things. What we realize here is we have to reduce our operating costs along with our overall expenditures to make sure that we can have money to invest into our renewal. Because right now we're investing about $350,000 into renewal, and we need to be at $3.85 million every year. $3.85 million. Now there's some key numbers I want council to be aware of is the $3.85 million annually and our deficit of $32 million. Yeah, those are our key numbers. So what we've done is we've met with our management team and our union, and we talked about some options that we need to consider here from an operational perspective. And we looked at we want to talk to council a lot more in the coming months about levels of service. And the levels of service, we talk about that is, right now we provide levels of service. If you make a phone call in about needles, we'll go down there and we'll pick them up. But how fast do we go and pick them up? Is it today? Is it in 5 minutes? Or is it in 2 days? Is that going to be satisfactory? Same with a pothole. Is a pothole going to be okay to be replaced or filled in 3 days? Or do we want imminent responses, 911 calls, where we go out and we fill the pothole in? And that's a level of service, but there's a cost to that. So we have to consider that. So that's what council will consider when it comes to this. A reduction of full-time equivalents. So in our organization, we've got a plan here that demonstrates some savings to the city. A reduction of work hours, potentially, to reduce some of our overall impact to the residents. And this whole plan that we're going to talk about today is to shift the burden off the residents and take it back operationally so we can do a balanced approach to this, so we can have some money for renewal. We talked about an increase in revenues, a moderate tax increase, make sure we stay in the middle of the road. Right now, we're at the bottom of the spectrum in our area when it comes to residential tax increase. We know our industry is at the higher end of the spectrum, and business is right in the middle. We have to be cognizant of that, but we still maintain the livability in the community. We have to look at our electrical rates when it comes to our electrical rate increases over the next couple of years to fund our assets. That's one of the things we've got to be aware of, so we don't go straight to every resident on an equal playing field. We say to them, if you're going to use more, then therefore it may cost you a little bit more in the long run when it comes to your bill. Water rates. We've got some water rates. We're going to be recommending to council to look at your water rates over the next few years. Make sure you make a sound decision when it comes to that, along with sewer rates. Addressing the fees and charges and an economic development, increasing the tax base. We have to consider about how much more taxation can we get in the community. And we mean with smart growth development. We don't want to see ourselves just simply, council said they don't want us to develop at all costs. What they're saying to us is find some good developments that fit into our community, which will bring more revenue into the city, which will take the burden off the residents and spread out the tax burden. So we've maintained, we looked at this from the three pillars, and what we're looking at is from an operational piece is is looking at the maintenance of service levels and risk management. So council is also going to be considering risk management with this report, is saying what type of risk is okay for the community. So one of the things that we talked about this is risk is going to be, is one sewer backing up in the community going to be okay? Or are we going to make sure that everything's so perfect that one sewer system or one home will not back up? Of course, we don't want to see the homes back up, but can we afford to maintain the sewer lines to the point where there will never ever be a backup on the sewer line? Can we afford that? That's having the flush truck out all the time and continually flushing the sewer lines and making sure that there's not going to be a backup. Or if our maintenance schedule is going to be okay, what does that look like? How many backups have we had? And what does that look like over the long term? So maybe we only have 2 per year or 5 per year. Is that going to be a desirable level of service for the community to expect in relation to sewer? If we want to have more service, we don't want to have any backups, then we have to ramp up our costs. If we want to back it off a little bit and maintain that to a point where it's manageable, that we feel as though it's manageable as an organization, then that's something that council will consider when it comes to level of service there. And risk management. Risk management is also looking at water mains. What happens if a water main breaks? What happens if they extend the life of that water main and that water main breaks and it's on a flat surface? You know, council might say, well, okay, we'll take a little bit more risk around that, but they don't want to take risk on the water main that goes up to the top of Valley Heights, because if it breaks and it severs, it'll be catastrophic when you talk about draining the reservoir and that water main draining and coming down the hillside, because we've created a torrent of debris. So council would be less inclined to take risks there. So what we had to know in our asset management plan is, what infrastructure do we have? What's it worth? What is the expected remaining life? What needs to be done? When do we need to do it? How much will it cost? And how do we ensure long-term affordability? So we know our water systems were 27 million. We have a remaining life of 14 million. We have an infrastructure deficit of 1.9 million that we need to catch up on just in the water system. So we need to be annually investing $784,000 into our water system alone. Right now, we invest $350,000 a year into infrastructure in our community as a whole, but we need to be investing 3.85 million. So this is where our financial gap is. We also have an infrastructure deficit of $32 million that we haven't caught up on. So we have to somehow catch up on that. So council tasked me with developing, this is from asset management perspective, is how are we going to do this? What does this look like? Wastewater systems were $25 million. We have an infrastructure deficit of 4.7 million. We need to invest $870,000 annually into the sewer system alone. Storm system, it's worth $5 million. We have a remaining life of 31%. We need to invest $2.5 million on storm. Electrical systems, we're $10 million, or close to $10 million. We need to invest $1 million a year into it. Roadways, they're worth $34 million. We have an infrastructure deficit of $20 million on our roads. Buildings and facilities, they're worth $20 million, and we need to invest $693,000 in deficit to catch up on that. And the fleet, when it comes to our fleet, it's worth $4.3 million, and we have an infrastructure deficit of $1.5 million. That means that we should have replaced $1.5 million in equipment. But council said, well, let's stretch out the life of those vehicles. So just because there's a little bit of rust on, just because it says that it requires a replacement according to the standards, maybe we can stretch the life out of that. So council takes a little bit of risk there, and that's okay. But this is the bottom line at where we are right now, is $3.85 million. How are we going to do that without placing the burden on the community was a big question. And what we said is, well, we can't go back and say, well, we'll just increase taxes, because I know that that would not fly. That would fly like a lead balloon in our community, in any community. So we said, what if we approach this from a 50% perspective? So we went through this and we said, well, what if we invest it to 50% and we find solutions? That's a sustainability gap that we can actually fund. So we talk about here, this is where we are. We need to be funding at $3.85 million. If we can reduce our costs and we increase some of our revenues, we can find our sustainability gap somewhere in here. Right now, we're investing $350,000. We're currently below this line. And what the plan that we have here will demonstrate that we'll have $1 million a year going into infrastructure renewal and $1 million going into reserves annually. That'll help us catch up on our infrastructure deficit and also put us to a point where we can actually look after the community, because as we know, our infrastructure doesn't care. Like, it doesn't care if we don't replace it. The roads will just simply deteriorate and they'll fall apart, and if they're not going to say anything, we're going to continue to go out there and try to maintain this. So what have we done? We've considered adjusting and deferring long-term capital projects. You can see that that water main in the river should have been replaced many, many years ago. There's some infrastructure projects we just simply said, we can't afford to do it now, so we're just going to push it off to the back. So we've lobbied UBCM and FCM for asset management grants. Council was there last week or 2 weeks ago asking the minister responsible for $2 million. Minister Fassbender's response was favorable to our community. He said somewhere along the lines that we're not at the back of the bus, but we're at the front of the bus. He recognizes everything we've been doing, and there is going to be some grant announcements coming out because the writ was dropped. The federal election, they had to suspend the announcements of grants, but we're in a positive situation. We're in a positive position, and I think the councillors over there can agree that there was a positive response coming out of the meeting. So we reviewed our existing tax rates and fees. We're looking at economic development. Council's made that a strategic priority, and we're doing a lot of things around that. There's a lot of conversations going around that right now in our community with myself and the mayor and our team. We've looked at alternative revenue sources, clean energy. We're looking at those things when it comes to transformer stuff in our communities, when it comes to our electrical system. So we're looking at that. We're taking a triple bottom line approach to capital planning. So the socio, the economic, and the environmental. Undertake annual condition assessments and risk assessments on those assets. Improve maintenance management. Consider regional partnerships for economies of scale. Adjust levels of service to improve operational efficiency. So our manager of operations is working on this. So we're actually determining how much money we're putting into our efforts on a daily basis to make sure that it actually makes sense. Because if we're going beyond the point where we can actually continue to provide maintenance to roads that are falling apart, at some point along the line, we have to stop and we have to figure out different solutions to that. Develop a set of performance measures. So are we maintaining our roads to a level that's beyond our means to afford? And develop financial policies to achieve financial sustainability. So that's going to be, the council's going to actually have a policy around these things for setting the tax rate increases, for setting the policies when it comes to hiring, when it comes to different practices in our community. Actually, there's some controls put in place. The other thing that we did undertake in 2011 was the agreement, the community agreed to borrow, the community agreed to borrow $5.5 million. Dan, can you bring up the Excel sheet? But the community agreed to borrow that, and when we agreed to borrow the $5.5 million, that equates to a 13% tax, close to a 13% tax increase on its own for 25 years. That's, and remember, we're depreciating by $3.85 million a year. So that only covers 1.5 years of that, and it takes 25 years to pay off that loan. So what we did is we went back, we looked at our community, we did some comparisons. We looked at how we stand from a workforce perspective. We have 26 outside workers and 10 inside work, or 10 management staff. We went through and we looked at and compared ourselves to other communities when it comes to the number of operational people that we have. So we looked at this and we said, maybe we can find a way to work a little bit smarter in our organization, and you're going to see a little bit more of this plan. But we looked at this, we compared all these, and we looked at our costs. We're looking at our community in comparison to others, but we've got to know that every community is not created equal. Some are flat, some are up hills, some have other needs. So we can't necessarily say that we're equal because we're one of 5 municipalities that has an electrical system. So we have to know that as well. But we have to know, so how do we leverage our organization to look at the different services that we offer to maybe be a little bit more of a hybrid employees rather than just saying, I work in this silo. Because if I work in this silo, then the taxpayers are the ones that bear the burden for that, because we know that the taxpayers are the ones that pay the revenue into the city, all the taxpayers, they cover our costs. So Diane, can we bring up the Word document again? I just want to go to the last portion of that. So when we scroll down on this, so we look at this here, this blue line, and this is our, this blue area is here where we're spending, and this is our revenue stream. So we're actually exceeding, we're living in our line of credit, and you can see here that we don't have any money going into reserves. This is our operational costs, and this is what we have to spend. So when we look at this as an organization, based on our depreciation, we're not even close. We need to be down here, so we actually have money going into the reserves. So when we look at our overall operating budget, we have to find a way to reduce our operating costs. So this is what we're doing. Let me scroll up a little further. So we look at our overall expenditures per population here. We're $2,600 per capita. We look at the remainder across the board. We did comparisons to other municipalities in BC to get some samples. We looked at our overall operating costs when it comes to each department. So governmental, general government is 1.7 million a year. Protective services is 579,000. Solid waste management is 187,000. Health and social services and housing, 118,000. Development services, $209,000 a year. Roads and public works, 1.2 million. Parks and recreation and culture, 825,000. Water services, 747,000. Sewer services, 688,000. Electrical, 3.8 million. But we remember we make those purchases, right? So we make a purchase of power from Fortis every year. Amortization. So this is the actual cost at the time that we purchase those assets. So that amortization is cheaper than what you would normally see, and it's not. That was the actual traditional costs. So we have all these expenditures. So we figured, we said, how are we going to do this? So we looked at a balanced approach. It was important for council to say, give me a balanced approach. So we said, well, we want to shoot by reducing our FTEs by our full-time outside staff by 3. How are we going to do that? Well, that would represent $300,000. And how does that look across the board? So if we did one in each of the departments, we do a balanced approach to things. One person coming out of the water department reduces our cost to $647,000 for water from $747,000. So we looked at this and we tried to take a balance across that. We looked at public works and parks, and we say, okay, so how are we going to do this? So we looked at $300,000 there. We have $250,000 coming from administration, and we talked to council about considering the SAG revenue. Can you roll up a little bit, Diane? The SAG revenue is something the council is going to have to consider as part of their asset management plan, because remember, they're depreciating by $3.85 million, and we have a deficit of $32 million. And we need this revenue to come in because we only have $350,000 to put towards this. So we've done all these different actions. So we get the proactive and economic development. We're undertaking reviews of taxation and fees and charges. The long-term actions will be the conversation about service levels, because we're going to have to revisit this. We're going to have to do surveys with the public to see, and sample surveys to represent everybody in the community. So we're getting some responses and actively sending out our team to go out and talk to these folks, to come back to council and potentially have council, have the folks generally directly communicate with council and say, I need more of this and I need more of that, or I want less of this and less of that. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the representation of the entire community. So we need to understand how much we can afford, because people want sidewalks on both sides of the street, but we don't necessarily need them on both sides of the street. So scroll up a little further, Diane. So we talked about that. We keep going up, please. So the next steps, council is going to consider over the next couple of years this plan, and it's going to be the projection is to increase electrical rates by 10% over the next 3 years, and that would generate $400,000 in revenue. So this is the actions, and how do we get there? So if we fund to 50%, and this is the strategy here is to fund to 50%, we'll get $400,000 from electrical to fund towards assets. If we take our residential tax rate up from 4.16 right now, for every 1,000 you're assessed, to 5.9 over 3 years, that would generate $670,000 in revenue that would go towards replacement of your assets. So now we're at $1 million. Development showcase. So we have the development projections. We know that we have some land that we can generate some revenue on. We want to continue on that path. We don't know what those dollars will represent because we know that the economy is something that we can't control. But we can eliminate the borrowing. We don't need to do the borrowing under this plan. We stop that $5.5 million borrowing, that 12% tax increase or 13% tax increase just for that. It eliminates that. We consider and eliminate the acquisition of assets. So acquiring an asset is not always a good thing to acquire. We want to consider, the triple bottom line that comes to that, and how does it fit into the asset management plan, considering the social and economic or social and environmental components of it. Amend the DCC bylaw. Development cost charge bylaw is a fund that the developers pay into that is a general fund that funds major infrastructure that impacts everyone. Determining allocation of reserves, or revenue reserves, so make sure we put that all together. Communicate and get this information out to the community. Asset management tax, we've considered that. Proactive management measures. Review the water and sewer rates in 3 years. Once we're through the installation of the water meters and we know what the rates are that are needed, we can consider the impacts of this, because remember, we went back to those numbers. We have $3.85 million that we need to be putting in each year, and we're only putting $350,000 in. So we have to have a policy that says when we have surplus, where that money goes, and development, financial management policy to ensure continuity with the asset management plan. Because this council has made asset management one of their key strategic priorities, and that plan has just been finalized for council to review, and then it'll be coming out for the public in the next probably 30 days. Can we move to the Excel sheet that speaks to the copy of reserves and surplus? So, can we go to the surplus first, please? So, right now, the city has $3.89 million sitting in what's called surplus. And that surplus is 1 year of our infrastructure deficit. 3.85 million is what we need to invest every year. So we have $3.89 million. Now, Roxanne, our Chief Financial Officer, she says that we need to make sure that we keep 20%, that we have access to 20% at all times. So we need to keep $2.85 million right available for access. But when we end up with surplus at the end of the year, and surplus is at the end of the year, if we have a surplus budget where we have extra money left over that we've saved throughout that budget, that would be allocated into the reserves as council sets the priority. Not as staff does it, but as council sets the bylaws. So if we end up with, say for instance, we end up with $500,000 in reserve, council tells us how that's allocated based on the assets they see as being critical. So what we would recommend to council is consider removing $1 million from this and putting into the replacement of some of our critical infrastructure so they don't have to borrow the money. You go and replace your water line that's needed and address your sewage treatment plant issues potentially as some of your critical things. But don't borrow the money at this point. So if we go to the reserve balances, so right now our reserves sit like this. The pointer. So our reserves are, right now we have $529,000 in our equipment reserve, which is actually pretty good. Our land sales reserve, so when we've sold land, we have $213,000. In this fund right here, a capital reserve, we have $46,000. This needs to be $32 million. Remember the infrastructure deficit that we need to have. And we need $3.85 million just below that for this year's infrastructure. But if we look at our tax sale, from tax sales, we have $62,000 from parking. This is probably when a developer paid some money in lieu of parking to the city. We had $4,078 and our SAG reserve, we have $1.1 million. Our gas tax fund, we have $480,000. Now this is federally controlled, so they tell us what we can spend it on. Our climate action fund, so every time that we create a ton of carbon, the city pays itself $25. We've made a commitment to become carbon neutral, so council will be considering if something in the future is a carbon neutral project that they have money towards. So that's towards their carbon neutrality. The library fund in the surplus of the library is $24,000. So we have a total of $2.5 million sitting in our reserves. So we look at that. So that gives us some access to some money. We control some of it, and some of it we don't control. If we look at the changes, please. So some of the things that have impacted our community, in 2011, we got $664,000 from the provincial government for the small community grant. We now get $501,000, but we've been impacted all the way along. It went from 678 down to 317, down to 315, and finally it's come back up a little bit. And then when the HST happened, that impacted us by $100,000, and postage has impacted us by a considerable amount. That's why we continually try to move everybody towards electronics. We don't want to be having those costs. If we can go to the borrowing for a second. The borrowing, just to talk a little bit more about that, at $5.5 million at 4.65%, which is a fairly good rate. If that fluctuates, that will change the impact to us. But basically, it's $387,000 a year we have to pay in payments for that for 25 years. And that's the impact to our community. And that, remember, that only addresses 4% of our overall need. So if we go to the rates, please. We look at our rates here. So we talk about this major industrial rate. They pay $43.39 for every 1,000 they're assessed. So we know the rock salt emitter for basically subsidize all of our residents in respect to, and I say this only from a financial perspective. They pay this, they pay it from, they subsidize our community considerably. So unless, if we lost that, that our residents pay $4.16 for every $1,000 they're assessed. These guys pay $823,000, almost half of our tax base in our community when it comes compared to our residential base. So we look at our business rate, it's able to be kept down because of the rate of $9.9 or $9.95. Recreational nonprofit, farm tax. This is our tax rate in our community. If our residential rate can come up to this amount here, it still keeps us in the middle of the road in our region, but it does represent $670,000, and then the extra $400,000 from the electrical rate throughout the course of time. This combined with our savings from operational costs of $500,000 puts us at $1.5 million, along with a couple of adjustments in there. I think we get up to about $1.65 million, and that funds us close to 50%, Mr. Mayor, of our overall infrastructure deficit. Now, if we can fund it to 50%, we're doing really well, because most communities can't. So rather than getting to $3.85 million, we can actually fund it to 50% at 1.6, close to 1.7 million a year. If we do that, we can start putting money away into reserves and start doing some renewal without spending, without borrowing money, and we can control it. The plan here, though, is come with some controversy, of course, because we have talked about this with reducing full-time employees. We've had great discussions with our union about this. We've talked about some solutions, and we're continuing talking about this. But moving into the 2016 year, council has to consider what is it that they want to do. If we don't control our spending along with our managing our operating costs, then we're going to be in a situation that it's going to be financially, the viability of our community is not going to be sustainable for the long term. And that's going to take council to be able to say, well, we're going to do less of this. We're not going to rush out and build these new projects that don't really fit into the core values of the community. Council's going to have be more focused on the key things when it comes to the asset management plan of the community. It doesn't mean they take away their social and environmental conscience. It just means they have limited funds to invest into it because they need to invest into the critical infrastructure that's falling around them. But this plan actually puts us into a position where we are actually in a sustainable position. And I think the key to this is at 50%, it is such a big step for our community because we've never known how much money we need to put away. So back to the question that was posed earlier on, is now we know what we have and we know what we need to do. We know we have some federal and provincial expectations on us, but now we know where we are and we know where we're going to be going. So when council raises their hand for a tax increase in the future, they'll have the science and the financial understanding of why they're making that tax increase. They're not doing it just because it's the 2%'s the cachet of the day. It's more, we know that we need to be here and we're going to make some sound decisions to get there. Does that come with some pain? Yes, but if we keep deferring this out, Mr. Mayor, if we keep deferring this out for another 10 years, those numbers and the impacts of the residents are only going to increase. And we know that it's going to place more of a burden. We know that we have to make some tough decisions. And I know that council has spoken about this and getting the asset management plan in order. And this is one of the major steps moving forward, is to understand where we are. And this helps us set the policy and direction. So this plan, though, does put us into a positive financial situation moving forward. And I think there's one thing that we can do is that we can know that our union and the organization is making some sound decisions on moving forward and part of the process. So that's the report I have for you, Mr. Mayor, on this, and I'd be happy to answer your questions for you.
Thank you. So the recommendation before we go into discussion is to receive the asset management financial plan report as presented and to further consider the plan to be part of the 2016 5-year financial plan. Councillor Thompson. I have a second. Councillor Crog. I will open it up for discussions. Councillor Butler.
First of all, just let me state that I am in full support of asset management. Cutting costs and putting aside money for infrastructure repair is at the top of my priority list. This is the same plan that was presented to council in camera. And I was uncomfortable with that at the time because I believe that budget items should be discussed in the public venue for the first time for the public to be able to hear it at the same time as council. This plan, however, after doing some research, I have some concerns with. Grand Forks Asset Management Program is not a locally made plan, but comes from a provincial government think tank called Asset Management BC. And it's a well-devised marketing tool to download infrastructure costs onto local taxpayers. $32 million in replacement costs is a completely unreasonable and unacceptable burden to the residents of Grand Forks alone. We need to lobby the provincial and federal governments to invest more money in infrastructure. In short, the asset management plan, as I see it, it uses positive adjectives to sell to us raising all rates and taxes while reducing jobs and services. We absolutely need to live within our means, but I'm concerned it's also a mask for privatization, where many city contracts are outsourced instead of being performed by public works staff. Privatization of city assets is the thrust of the plan, which we are only in the beginning stages of. On the surface, the plan seems reasonable and necessary, as pipes do need replacing, but the results of the assessment done by the city consultants upon review, I think, is extravagant. Recommended replacements are mostly based on a book value of years designated to each asset and not on actual wear. Many of the costs can be deferred far into the future. Asset Management BC has a website for anyone that's interested in their long-term plans and is being marketed with the help of the Public Works Association of BC and private industry stakeholders. In Australia, a similar project was undertaken, and today a lot of their infrastructure is privatized. I don't want to head down that road. And considering the amount of money needlessly spent this year on lawyers' fees and contract payouts, and the additional infrastructure burden of maintaining water meters, I question the real-time allotment of our tax dollars. Surely no one on this council ran on the platform of privatization and privatizing our city. I know one member who actually ran an election platform promoting to do everything homegrown. Let's not be bamboozled by outside interests who are dictating our city policy to us. Policy needs to be directed from the citizens of this town and not from provincial government in conjunction with the private sector. Homegrown common sense would also tell us that listening to our workers down at Public Works is a good start towards improvement, as they are our biggest assets. And they need to feel valued and respected. Happy workers are the foundation of a successful business, and workers who enjoy their workplace are more productive. The city should endeavor to work openly with the union to reduce hours within the collective agreement and maintain the staff we have by contracting out to private interests less often. I won't be supporting this proposal, and I think it would be prudent of council to review the whole asset management policy that we've inherited from previous council. We've been told that being the poster child for Asset Management BC will get us more grants from the provincial government, and what I've heard, they're very happy with us for promoting their plan at UBCM. And if council were to reject this plan, would we still receive grant money? I don't know. Perhaps the solution lies somewhere in the middle ground. And I'm just wondering, is there another asset management plan out there other than the one from Asset Management BC? Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Well, thank you for your comments, Councillor Butler, very interesting. As a member of the council back when we initiated the asset management plan, there was never any discussion or consideration, nor would I, as a member of this council, support the privatization of any of our infrastructure and utilities. I think that's a real stretch. Of course, as a member of council, you're certainly entitled to your thoughts and to express them, but I would have to disagree with much of what you have put forward this morning.
Councillor Butler.
Indeed, asset management involves selling as many of our owned assets as we can, because as we've been told, we're not able to amortize these assets and continue paying for them. So right now, the smaller assets we're selling off, just like we saw the motion come forward earlier this year that council own our own computers. All the little assets right now, we're wanting to download so that we don't have to amortize them. So we're selling off our assets. So as we sell them, they're bought by private interests, which is privatization.
Councillor Crowe.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the privatization works into assets. If we sell a truck that's no longer required and we sell it to an individual, I can't even see how that's privatization, but, a lot of, people running for office, ran on a platform that our infrastructure is shot. It's crap, it's falling apart, and if you elect me, I'm gonna do something about it. Well, guess what? This is something about it. That's what that is, doing something.
Gentleman in the back.
My name is Donald Ferran. First, 2 points. The first one is that the public needs to understand that the CAO of Grand Forks, Mr. Doug Allen, is the Vice President of Asset Management BC and the Vice President of BC Public Works. So therefore,
Yeah.
if you permit, Your Honor,
Hang on.
I'm a acting director on the Asset Management BC and the president-elect of the Public Works Association.
Congratulations.
So just to clarify that
For clarification, go ahead, Mr.
so, the title changes, but nevertheless, Mr. Allen is a representative of the philosophies of those two organizations. So coming again to the point of privatization, I'm looking at open-ended contract, cost plus contracts that have been allocated in Grand Forks and are about to be allocated in Grand Forks, outsourcing work that could be very well carried out by the city works crew. Now, Mr. Krog just said that he's totally, like he doesn't see any privatization. That is basically how one undermines institutions. And the institution of city workers is basically outsourced with these contracts to install pit meters, build roads, do whatever. And what happens is that what we end up with in 30 years' time, we end up with no city works crews, with a couple of administrators in Grand Forks, and everything is outsourced. And there are provincial governments, there are federal governments that basically follow this line of direction. And this, by adopting the asset management strategy, this is where this council is heading. That's the long view.
It's a far stretch, but I'll pass you to Councillor Crowe.
Yeah, I love a good conspiracy theory as
No, it's talking
most of
about
us do.
contracts.
Excuse me,
Excuse me, sir.
I'm speaking now. Thank you, Mr. Fran. It's starting to sound like, and I'll say it's a conspiracy theory, because we're talking about stuff that is in the future that is probably never going to happen, not even close. And the city of Grand Forks has contracted out work ever since I've lived here. And that's been since '88, I believe. We have our city crews doing a certain amount of work, and if it requires expertise that we don't have, we contract out, right? That, to me, that makes sense. And it's not privatization. They're specific contracts. The other thing too is if we put all of our city workers to do these contracts, well, guess what? That number from 19 is going to look more like Nelson's of 33. So do we want to keep it all in-house and hire more people, or do we want to deal with it? And even to suggest that Mr. Allen has a philosophy, and that's why I call it conspiracy when people are talking about, oh my God, this weird cabal, and he belongs to a board that looks at asset management, and he's in favor of it, so am I. And I am happy that he sits on those boards, because that's where we have good information coming from. So it's not some weird, yeah, anyways, I'll be quiet before I say something.
Councillor Thompson.
Bad.
Thank you, Your Worship. When we discussed the assets of this municipality, and the numbers the value of all of those assets. And we want to reduce that because we have to amortize all of those assets, every computer, every small item that's considered an asset. We have to do the amortization on that. By getting rid of those small, being able to we'll use computers as an example. Instead of the city owning 7 computers for each member of council that they have to replace on a basis and to amortize. If each individual council were given an allowance and they own the asset, that money would have to be expended anyway, but it doesn't sit on the city's books and it's not amortized. And so people get all excited about things that they don't fully understand or pay attention to. And that's really unfortunate because that's where rumors and start. And, you know, to insult our CAO, and quite frankly, Mr. Ferrand, that was an insult, who has great admiration throughout the industry of local government, because he serves on 2 organizations, one being Asset Management BC and Public Works Association of BC, benefits this community greatly. And it's unfortunate that you find it necessary, I'm going to say on a semi-regular basis, to come into this council chambers, not being a resident or a taxpayer of this municipality, and spew forth your malicious innuendos and comments. And that's unfortunate. That doesn't benefit anybody.
Point of order, can we stick to the agenda, item, please?
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that sometimes, you know, I've been owned a business in my life where I've had lots of tractors and trucks and shovels and forks and power tools, et cetera. And I never consider those assets. I consider them liabilities. They're important tools in which we need to run businesses. I think this would have been better called an asset and liability management plan. There are real costs to running a city, and I think we are privileged, and there's a sense of entitlement that we have in Western society, that we can just go in and flush our toilets and turn on our taps and drain our sinks and turn on our automatic wash machines and our dishwashers, and that all that stuff just disappears down a magic hole. But I think that we need to take responsibility for our lifestyle in our Western society and understand that there's a cost to the extreme comfort that we live in here in Grand Forks and in Western society. And I speak about that with a lot of sadness, knowing that our Indigenous communities don't have, and many of our communities don't even have running water. And here we are complaining because we need to really dig deep in order to keep our drains and our pipes and our plumbing up to scratch. I don't live in the city, but I have a septic tank and I have to get it pumped out, and I am very conscious about what I put down my toilet or down my sink. And I'm responsible for, my well and making sure that my livestock have water. I have to pay for that. I also want to just point out here, there's nowhere in the points about how we're going to do it was we're going to contract out. And as has been stated here, none of us on council are ever going to agree to privatize this council today for the next 3 years that we remain in council, are never going to agree. We've already said that to privatize our public works, Mr. Mayor. We've already passed the motion that we're no longer going to support having bottled water in council, or that we're going to privatize our water system. We passed a motion here unanimously. We are very conscious of that, Mr. Mayor. I look at this, we're seeking alternative revenue sources such as clean energy generation. I am that councillor who talked about the homegrown. I believe in that. I'm excited about clean energy generation. I want to see that happening really soon here. Here's another one. Consider regional partnerships and economies of scale. It makes sense that we share some of our equipment amongst other municipalities that are small as well. It's ridiculous for us to own big equipment that barely gets started. And when I ran my business, I learned that it was more economical for me to contract out than to pay people that work for me to do a job that it wasn't in their realm of expertise. And then I didn't want to have to buy pieces of equipment to do that. I hired somebody to do it. Develop a set of performance measures. I'm not sure what that means, but I think it's fully, but I would like that to be explained a bit more. But I think in this asset management plan, we're just doing due diligence here. I also want to see that citizens reduce use. We become more conscious, that maybe we look at alternative toilets even, like composting toilets or incineration toilets or rain barrels. And when we talk about reducing operations of staff to 3 FTEs and 2 FTEs, we talked about this as a council, that we just want to do it creatively, that actually could be something that our staff welcomes, that we can just say, who here would like to go from a 5-day work week down to a 3? I would. I mean, that's perhaps relieving a burden of employment off of some of our staff, that we offer creative opportunities to reduce the 3 FTEs outside and 2 inside by saying, who wants to reduce their work hours? There's many, many people in our community that need a job, but want their job, but also want to do something else. So I think that there are elements to this, what I call an asset and liability management plan, that are allowing us to be creative, while at the same time, not in any way suggesting that we're going to go to increasing P3s and taking jobs away from the people in our community. I don't want to scaremonger. I realize this happens in other communities. We're aware of it. Thank you for reminding us again and again and again, Ms. Butler, but we are conscientious and caring and socially just citizens and a council. And I know that Councillor Hammond agrees with me. We've talked about this before. Neil, Christine, we've spoken about this, that we agree that we want an asset and liability management plan that works for everybody, but it's also conscious that we start to do what we need to do, because we need to think about our 7th generation principle, which is our children and our grandchildren and our grandchildren's grandchildren, and not just keep putting this off. And it means that we have to do some heavy lifting right now, because we're the ones who are flushing the toilets.
Before I get to you, Councilor Butler or CEO, have a...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In addressing the point of performance measures, we'd like to make sure that we're able to, across the organization, is develop, ensuring we're providing value for money. So when we're out doing things, whether it's in public works or administratively, are we providing value for money when it comes to the taxpayers' dollars? So those performance measures will develop that standard when it comes to value for money. So we can actually report back to council and say, you're getting good value here, or you're not getting good value here. A good example of great value in our community is, just off the top of my head, is fire services. Our fire services are great value for money, and probably, a lot of communities would love to go back to that rather than having full paid fire departments that the taxpayers have to pay for 4 shifts and all the apparatus and the levels of service in Vancouver, because that's one of their biggest struggles right now is that the amount of money that they cost to have a firefighter on full time in those shifts is a huge burden. And then they're finding that they're only pulling hose every once in a while. That's where they're not finding good value for money. Now, that's a social economic balance. Back to the point where this asset management plan only deals with assets owned by the City of Grand Forks taxpayers. It is not done with anything from the provincial assets. It has nothing to do with federal assets. It is only everything that our communities agreed to pay for and our citizens have agreed to pay for since Grand Forks was incorporated. So that's everything that is owned by the City of Grand Forks. So we're not talking about amortizing, replacing anything else that is not owned by the City of Grand Forks taxpayers.
If I may just comment on Councillor Crog's comments earlier regarding homegrown and farming out. I believe in homegrown also, but at the same token, if we use our public works people to do big contracts, we're taking them away from their job of maintaining our city. And how often do we have big contracts? At that point, we will have to hire more people. Then what do we do with them when there are no contracts? Then we have to let them go. Is that better? I don't think so. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you remember back to the springtime, I was the only one that voted against the budget for this year because I said that it was living outside of our means. And at the time I was belittled because I was new and I didn't understand and I didn't have a background in accounting. But here we see, we are living outside of our means. And now that the CAO has given this report, council seems to agree with that. But back in the springtime when I said it, didn't seem to hold much water. The other thing is the $32 million that's being touted as our asset deficit is extremely inflated. It's a number that then the 3.2 or 3.5 million per year is based off of. And as I said, those assets aren't all completely crumbling. Yes, we do have problems with our pipes. I agree. And yes, we do need to cut our costs. I've been saying that since the springtime. I'm just saying that I don't think that this is the way to do it. I don't think our policy with private interests is how it's supposed to work. I think the citizens of Grand Forks hire us to make the policy. We should be creating our own policies and not just accepting these ones that are coming down from us from the private sector.
To comment on that, we are being dictated by the provincial government because without asset management, we will no longer be eligible for grants because asset management is becoming mandatory. Councillor Thompson, and then the lady in the back, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Butler, you stated that the 32 million was an overinflated amount of the deficit. Can you tell me on what you base that and what you would determine to be the amount of our asset deficit?
Councillor Butler.
Well, first of all, that's irrelevant because I'm not an expert and nobody would take my opinion on it. But when you're dealing with these type of numbers, I think it might be good to get a second opinion on something like that. I did read the urban systems report that was done. I read it before I was elected council and I've read it again. And I've looked at all the different assets that they've listed for renewal. And I've looked around town because I live here. And a lot of the things that they've listed, I don't see to be in a state of deterioration. Like our CAO said, it depends on how much risk council is ready to take. I'm not ready to take risks with people's drinking water, people that have dirty water coming out of their taps now. I think that's an absolute priority. I'm not willing to take a risk with the pipe going across the river for fire service. That needs to be replaced. I mean, those are important things that need doing now, and we need to have grants for this now. We're getting grants right now for asset management, which means we're getting $100,000 for asset management software. I'd like to see a $100,000 grant to replace that pipe going across the river. I'd like to see us get the grant for our new well that we've needed for the last couple of years so that we can have higher water flows in the summertime. I could go on, but I won't.
Just a quick comment on that 32 million. Irregardless if that number is not substantiated, we must all agree that we are falling behind. And if we don't do something soon, we're going to fall further behind. It's a common practice. It's not rocket science. And as our CEO just stated to me, that is, we're working on a 50% ratio right now, hoping that won't do any dire straits. To the lady in the back, my apologies for making you wait so long.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Ellen McDonald. My husband and I are leaseholders at the airport. And of course, with a plan like this, the devil is always in the detail. And I'd just like to point out that the proposal is approximately a 1% tax increase, if that's the choice of the council, for the residents of the city, but it's a 300% increase for the leaseholders at the airport. And we believe that this is something that you should be made aware of. Because in the new, we can appreciate also that new revenue streams are sought, but we believe that this is quite an onerous detail that needs to be recognized. So thank you.
Thank you. With all due respect, we will be addressing that in one of the next items coming up. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The items that are listed that are assets, but also liabilities, because they are actually decreasing in value, they're obviously, like Councilor Butler has stated, they need to be listed because the city owns them. We have to manage them, and they are or will continue to deteriorate. But in our wisdom, and it's only intelligent and smart for us to prioritize. We need to prioritize those specific projects that you have mentioned. Absolutely. And we have to live within our means. When we approved the financial plan in the fall, in the spring of this year, at that time, we discussed the absolute positive need in this coming year, which we're happening now, to start to really look at our asset and liability management plan. And that is what we're doing. And we're doing it now as we go into the financial plan or the budget for next year. This is exactly what we talked about at that time, was we're going to do this so that we're prepared when we go into the budget for 2016. So this is exactly what we discussed we were going to do, and we're doing it now, doing due diligence, so that when we go into the budget for 2016, we have this in mind with the increase in tax rate. But we do need to prioritize. Of course we do. If we don't prioritize, how can we go toward, we can't apply for the grants. We will go for specific grants to fix those pipes.
May I just say that what we are doing is for the best interest of the citizens, because that's what we were elected to do. Leading the second role.
Thank you to everyone who's thinking about how we can take good care of our city's infrastructure, etc. Trying to figure out how we can bring in revenue and lower costs. I looked at page 65 here where we're talking about comparing to other communities, and I didn't see any that had their own electrical utilities, so it's a little difficult to address there.
No.
But I'm glad that,
Nelson.
yeah, but it wasn't on our list, so the one that we were given. But I wanted to say that when I read one of our reports, it said that it cost about $10,000 to change rates, reevaluate rates, say it's water rates. And online, just a few days ago, there was a community that was talking about, they got their smart water meters and they were paying over $60,000 for a rate review. I'm seeing on page 66, it talks about undertake a review of rates, taxes, and fees, and with consultants. I'm curious if we know how much that might cost for our community, seeing that it can be expensive for other communities. Just thinking about, what costs we're looking at here. On the bottom of page 66, we're talking about potential barriers to implementation, legal, labor, and contractual obligations. I'm hoping that the council and staff will put a priority on working respectfully and honorably with all the staff and working as a team, so there's less chance of incurring losing money that way. So I'm hoping that that could be worked on, everyone working together. On page 67, we're talking about eliminating the acquisition of assets. Looking, if you could go back, back to the page where you had the spreadsheet, the other one. So the one that had the gas tax on it.
That's one, yeah. Oh, sorry, oh, no, that's the reserves, yeah.
Thank you. So we're talking about putting in more assets, we're acquiring more assets by putting in water meters. And there was the discussion about, well, have we looked at it financially? I know from reading the reports, they were asking for us to do a more current cost-benefit analysis. It wasn't done. But I'm wondering, what's the situation financially now? I see at the top there we have almost $1 million, and then I heard Mr. Allen say we have 480,000. Yeah, we're talking about installing pit meters and indoor meters. Is is that what we really have for 180,000? And is that have any chance of covering all these anticipated costs of installations? Maybe we'll start with that question. Oh,
So Mr.
look
Mayor,
and gas tax. So you see at the top, it's 900,000 some, and then, yeah, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the answer to that question is the manager of operation is getting the sample batch of those things. There's been some money that's already been allocated in the 2015 financial plan to those reserves. So there's been money that's been allocated already. So the other piece on, and there were so many, I think there was questions in there.
Cost for getting a rate analysis?
Oh, so when it comes to our rate analysis, one of the things that we have to be careful of when it comes to these things is taking our time and doing them properly. So some communities go out and they do it relatively quickly. And one of the things you'll see in there is we recommend to council over the next 3 years is to do the analysis of your water and sewer rates to make sure you get it right. Because the one thing is your water utility as the councils, one of the things the staff is tasked with is making sure that we don't bring forward a plan that is reckless and irresponsible that potentially bankrupts a utility that the utility payers would have to compensate for. So you want to make sure you balance that. So our rate analysis, as long as council's not in too big of a hurry, that allows the finance department to look at that and compare it to all the different studies and stuff that we have, because we have this study, we have our capital works plans, we have our operational budgets, we have contractual obligations when it comes to employees. And whenever there's changes, it's not just a simple fix, it's there's a lot of information for the director of finance to go through. So we have to make sure any impacts from postage, small community grants. I mean, the department is tasked with all kinds of different changes coming at them. So yeah, I would say that, yeah, we'll be doing it responsibly. And when it comes to that financially, council will be asked to provide funding should it be needed. It will be asked in a council meeting as part of the budget, should they need the funding for those things. Staff doesn't just run out and hire these things. What we do is it's included in the financial plan and council's aware of that. And the community is, because they participate in the budget discussions when it comes to the presentations that are done by staff every year in the budget process. And I think there's about 6 or 7 meetings that the community is invited to participate in, and staff presents all the information. So everybody is presenting the information.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to the rates, we do have the Water Rates Review Committee that will be meeting at some point in the future to discuss and make recommendations to council on those rates. And we as a group do not have the expertise required, and so we are going to need some professional assistance so that the rates that we will be recommending are fair and equitable to our users.
Councillor Butler.
I also see on page 66 what Councillor Ross was talking about, to develop a set of performance measures. Says that we'll work with our consultants to do this as well. And again, I know those consultants are expensive. I believe we've spent almost over $800,000 in the last 3 years on consulting fees. So when we talk about asset management and reducing costs, I'd like to see those costs brought down, and these performance measures, if that's something that could be done in-house, I think definitely could save us some costs, just like the other consulting fees that Ms. Semenoff was talking about, as well as reducing the lawyer's fees. I would be curious to know how much the city has spent on lawyer's fees this year. I'd really like to know that.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't disagree that consultants are expensive, but my belief is that if you don't use the expertise of consultants and you go ahead with a project that's our staff, our managers don't have full knowledge of, it could be much more costly in the future.
Lady in the second row.
I didn't feel one of my questions was fully answered, but the reason I'm talking about these things is I want us to be fully aware of the costs we're investing in water meters, and I wanted to be clear on what money we've really spent out of there, how much we really have, what we're thinking of spending. That's not clear to me as it's described, but also to be aware that to switch to a volumetric pricing, from what I've read, it can be quite complicated to make it fair. Some places are saying the fairest thing is to charge per number of people in the home, which when you think about it, that might be because each person uses a certain amount of water, and it can get costly. Just to really be aware that this is the investment that would be going in this. Just that's my hope right now. So I still don't have clarity of which money has been spent. Has that $600-some thousand already been spent, or is that what's anticipated to be spent on the meters? What do we really have in that gas tax account right now?
So, Mr. Mayor, the 685 has been allocated, and there's 480,000 left in there. Does that make sense?
So allocated means it hasn't been spent, but you're.
It's allocated in the 2015 budget this year as part of it. It's been allocated and accounted for in this year's budget. Am I correct? So that means there's 480,000, close to $500,000 left in there.
And by allocated, that's where the money would come from for putting in the pit meters?
Put meters and the remainder of installations.
And do you believe that'll cover it all?
Well, that's what the manager of operations is sorting through right now. There's been substantial impacts to the program along the way that you're aware of, and that the city is addressing right now. We're dealing with that piece right now. The manager just reported that he was doing a test sample to be able to come back and report it back to council. Earlier on in his report, he suggested that he was doing that and that he was getting that information. And the mayor asked the question was, who was involved with that? So he answered that, and then he said, this is what we're doing, and that addressed the mayor's questions and report.
The gentleman in the back, and then Councillor Butler. Did you have your hand up? Yes.
Yes. Did the general manager of operations not say at the last committee of the whole meeting that there had been 2 submissions on the pit meter installation? One had been for $600,000 plus cost, and the other one for $800,000.
I don't recall any numbers, but I will forward that over to you.
Yeah, Mr.
So
Mayor,
as the director of operations, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, thank
Appreciate
you. Mr. Mayor, the manager of operations had received a couple of quotes, but there was no test holes done. There was no exact measurements on the depths of the services because they can range from 12 feet to 4 feet in depth. So what he's trying to do is get a representation sample of that. Unless, if you were to do this project in another way, so we talk about removing the eliminations for needs for consultants, if you actually do this properly and bring in more consultants, what you do is you bring in a geotechnical firm and they would do sample holes to measure the exact depth of each service and to get the soil conditions for each of those services. Then that would give you a cost allocation for each hole. So then the contractor would know what he or she was bidding on when it came to soil conditions for disposal, reinstallation of the material, if there's an old Volkswagen bug in the ground, what they would be encountering. So they would be able to bid on that. The contractors provide bids based on the uncertainty of what they're dealing with. So that's what those bids would look like.
Again, to you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I believe that's a lot of bifurcation on the question that's being asked. So even considering that all these samples have to be taken on possible pit meters, so now the question is, at the last meeting, there were 2 numbers given, and we've got, either $600,000 plus cost or $800,000 no plus cost, and we've got $400,000 indicated. Is the chief administrative officer telling us now that by going through the process the way he's just illustrated, that he's going to be able to do all those installations within the $450,000 in the gas tax money, or are we headed for a boondoggle and a black hole? And this is not a conspirational question. It's just, what are the numbers?
So I'll pass you to our CEO, and if he answers your question, will you be accepting it?
If I have an answer to my question that's clear, I will.
Our CEO.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure what the customer refers to as boondoggle. So was that the question? Is this headed toward the boondoggle?
The actual numbers.
The actual numbers. So the actual numbers, so is that, sorry, to be clear on the question, can I get the question again? So I have.
Yes. Last month,
No, that's.
I was here at the committee of the whole meeting, and the question arose about the pit meters and the inside meters. And it was said that there had been two proposals for the pit meters. One came in at $600,000 plus cost, an open-ended contract like you've done in the past at the city. And the other one was for $800,000, no extra cost. We've got $450,000 in the kitty. Regardless of what needs to happen, will the city be able to do the installations of the remaining pit meters and inside meters with the amount that's left not unspent?
Mr. Mayor, for point of clarification, we have never let an open-ended contract. The contracts that we do are done by MMCD or CCDC, which is a contracting standard that allows for the quantities to be accounted for and billed for as per the bids. So there is no open-ended contract, so I'd like to clarify that, Mr. Mayor.
Well, it costs plus.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, I'm no longer, I'll address this question outside of chambers, Mr. Mayor, because I feel like we're not getting to a point where we can address this. This is basically just a battle. And if the customer would like to come forward and provide his residence, and we can talk a little bit about that in respect to that, I'd be happy to answer that.
The question is straightforward on the numbers. Will the remaining meters be installed with what's left in, because we are dealing with big finances, we have an expert in asset management. Will all the remaining meters be installed with the money that's left?
So, Mr. Mayor, that report is coming to council as per the manager's test pieces that he is providing right now. He's just made it clear that he is doing the test batches to determine what those costs are, because the contractor's prices came in high. So they're getting a sample batch to make sure that there is no, that is unforeseen. So I can't answer the question what the fellow was answering, because that has remained to be seen, because this is coming forward, these test pieces.
You're asking for a hypothetical answer.
No.
Yes, you are, because the question has been answered. Councilor Butler.
Will there be a budget amendment brought before council if this project goes over the budgeted 1.3 million?
Mr. Mayor, that's required by law, so yes, and the minister has to provide approval on that. So if there is a budget amendment, it is required by law.
I will have to say this is going to be the last question if it's redundant on the same issue over and over, because we must move on. We have an in-camera after this. Go ahead.
Okay, so looking at that spreadsheet, I also see climate action money, and I'm thinking, well, okay, I like that 2010 report that gave ideas about how to really evaluate well the percentage of leakage in the main pipes. Now, if it's higher than 15%, can some of that climate action money be used to be put into repairing the water mains? Because that helps the environment with decreasing waste of water. And the other idea, based on the conversation we've had, is I'm curious, can council communicate with other councils in other municipalities about ways that they are addressing lowering their costs and bringing in revenue to have a collection of ideas besides just one recommended source? So that's it. So two things about the climate action and consulting with other municipalities.
You want to take this one, Councilor?
Yeah, I just want to say the other ideas for reducing costs. Asset Management BC is promoting this to all communities around the province. So all communities around the province are accepting this same proposal of how to reduce their costs. It's not just something that Grand Forks is doing.
Mr. Mayor, for clarity, UBCM is the place where they get together, they talk about ideas, and councils will get together. They actually have a meeting like this where the resolutions are put on the floor and they discuss these, the benefits, the pros and cons of these things. Councils collaborate at UBCM. The $22,000 that's right there at climate action. So Councillor Ross had pointed out that she wanted homegrown clean energy concepts. This is where this money may be considered, but it's at the discretion of council. So it's at the discretion of council. The other question was, or the other point was, Councillor Butler had suggested that, what was the other point, Councillor Butler?
All municipalities.
All municipalities. No, this is not a universal plan. the asset management is the concept of making sure you have your business in order for your assets and make sure that you got your stuff in order. That's what the province is saying. Get your business in order. If you're coming forward for money with your hat in your hand to the province, don't come forward unless you have a good business model in place. This is not a cookie cutter piece. The concept is there. Now you have to make it fit into your business, because you can't take this into car dealerships and fabricating shops. You have to take it into, this is the city business and this is your cost, this is what you own. And the actual amortization of assets is required by law under PSAB 3150, which was required upon us to make sure we amortize our assets so we know what we own. We can't just have a boneyard of assets that we can't put the burden on our taxpayers to own. So we're required to do this stuff. So I guess the answer to that question is that this is not a cookie cutter concept. This is fitting our business plan.
Councillor Ross and Councillor Crawford.
Yeah, I'd like to address that line item of climate action. I would never approve robbing that line item to fix old infrastructure. I think that we do need to tighten our belt, dig a little deeper, but to rob that line item where we need to potentially spend that money to do meaningful test or project. I don't even think we need to even test it on converting our energy use to solar, putting up some solar panels, starting using more solar here in City Hall as a test. Let's do some wind projects. I think that line item should not be robbed. Let's just take why don't we even take money out of the library? We take the money out of, pick another line item. That's equally appalling. It's equally appalling. Why don't you have a bake sale? There's, this is not a cookie cutter plan. This is not a cut and paste. This has come out from, yes, the provincial body, and we have an opportunity to look at that and tailor make it to work for our community, our reality, to the personalities that live here. And that's what we're really trying to do. And you also have a council here where, as I said already, we unanimously agree that we will protect our community from privatization that we know and we have seen happen in other communities around the world. And that will happen and is being can be legislated from the federal government due to the TPP and CETA and other trade agreements that they entered into without asking us. And that's why I put forward a resolution that we would opt out of CETA, or I think we should opt out of TPP, but didn't get a lot of support beyond here in Grand Forks and our council. It didn't get through to the AKBLG, and sadly, it didn't get to the floor of the UBCM. But to me, I look at the council as a part of a resistance movement, which resisting exactly some of the concerns that have been aired here today.
Councillor Crawford.
Secession. No, I'm kidding. I don't have really too much to say for myself, so I'll speak for other councillors, I guess. And she can correct me if I'm wrong. I do not think Councillor Butler was referring to a cookie cutter plan across the province. I think she was referring to the fact that the majority of municipalities in the province are dealing with asset management, but it wasn't specifically this plan because each one's unique. But every community is facing the exact same thing, right? So.
Can I correct him if he's wrong?
Yes.
I'm going to have to limit this debate. Because we
Because I'm in it, but Councillor Cox's having fun.
Well,
Our CAO is going around the province promoting BC asset management's plan to other communities. That's what I was referring to.
Oh,
okay. We have a question on the table.
no, I don't think so.
Okay, I will entertain one last.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
Why are you saying that? He's not going around.
Excuse me. Council, order, please. One last question. Then
Gloria,
we're going to go to the question.
it's more of a statement. I just want to say that this Mr. Param's
Your name, please.
Gloria Cook
Thank you.
speaks and spoke for many concerned citizens here, not just himself, And Councillor Ross and Butler and others have spoken to this already, but to brush off his stated concerns about privatization is wrong. Many people, not just in Grand Forks, like Councillor Ross has stated, have these concerns. So it's wise that we bring it up and keep it in mind as to what we do. So that's my comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, but under no circumstances was he being brushed off. But when the form of questioning gets beyond the level of acceptance, that's what it was. There was no brushing off. We would never brush off any citizens. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. There was a statement made about our CAO going to municipalities throughout the province promoting asset management. And I would just like, through you, if he could just give just a statement or a short comment on that. I don't believe he's going city to city.
Yes, I would. So I'd like to hear that.
Mr. Mayor, what happened was I was part of the Asset Management BC and as a representative from the city of Grand Forks. And what I was doing there was the federal or the provincial government under the gas tax had created a new criteria on the gas tax funds. And what I was doing was doing our regional contribution under our grant application that we had applied for was what was our regional contribution towards the one of the gas tax applications. And I went to 3 different locations in British Columbia under the funding from the funding of the UBCM to talk about the grant criteria that we created as a group on that. So we had actually applied for a grant fund on developing, it was a $190,000 grant application that we had for the council approved as part of the financial plan, which was for developing performance standards. And I was out speaking about the criteria and how we're moving the gas tax funding and what's implied with that, and offering up the ability to answer questions to people on asset management.
Can you say where you were?
And just to echo that, at the UBCM, I had noticed that a lot of municipalities aren't even aware of what asset management is, and they had actually contacted Mr. Allen at the same table, and I was very proud that our city was able to put this forward, that we're so knowledgeable on the subject.
3 places.
What 3 places?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it was Cranbrook, Kelowna, and Nelson.
Councillor Butler, this would be the one.
Yeah, just for clarification, Mr. Allen, did you say you're being remunerated by Asset Management BC for these excursions? Or is the city of Grand Forks paying for this?
No, those were covered by UBCM, those costs.
So now may we address the question on the floor? All in favor of the motion? So, okay, all against?
Opposed and recorded, please.
Councillor Butler is opposed to that motion. Do we need to read the motion back, or is everybody aware of it? Okay, because it's been so long.
Do we have a 5-minute recess?
I'd like to call a 5-minute recess, please. I call this meeting back to order.
Well,
Moving along now, we're going to go to our proposed bylaws for discussion. The Manager of Operations Bylaw 1958A1 RFD Manager of Operations Fees and Charges Amendment, and that's the subject matter. Your Manager of Operations, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What we're trying to do is we're gonna take our operational bylaws that we have and try to take all the fees and put them in the fees and charges bylaw. So we've done that with the campground, the proposed airport. We've updated the technology bylaw fees portion and put them all into one place to, instead of bringing back all the bylaws every year to council, we just bring the fees and charges to council.
Thank you. So the recommendation is that council receives a report and further direct staff to present to council the first three readings of the proposed fees and charges amendment bylaw 1958A1 at the October 26, 2015 regular meeting of council. May I have that motion?
I would like to move that this report be received for discussion. I have a couple of questions on it, so I don't want to move the other.
Okay. Open for discussion.
The schedules where there's headings, and I've noticed this throughout, highlighted in yellow. Are those the changes? Are those the new portion that we're being asked to consider? Or is that just?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the yellow highlights the areas of change. So for Schedule A, there's a few highlighted changes in the lower part. There are some that there are the whole schedules, like as in Schedule D. That's a new proposed schedule, so that whole area is new. And then the F is a proposed change, which is also it's new.
Thank you.
Just for clarity,
Yours, you.
just for clarity, I think what we're doing is these are being introduced into this amending bylaw, and they're going to form part of the fees and charges bylaw. So they're new. They used to exist in the other bylaw itself. So now these are just existing in the fees and charges bylaw, except for the airport. Except for the airport piece.
So has there been any changes to the actual fees? Have they been increased or are they the same? Are they just being brought under one umbrella, which I think is much cleaner, by the way? So I guess that's what I would like to know.
Thank you. There are some, like Schedule B with the technology, they have been updated and there are some new fees included in there. The campground, again, the airport is all new. And the campground is a suggested increase for 2017, as we haven't had an increase in camping rates since 2012.
Councilor Thompson.
Yes, can, just for Schedule D, the airport fees and charges, on what was that based? Was that based on comparatives with other municipal airports, or was that based on, what was it based on?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to let Daniel Drexler, our deputy manager, speak to how exactly those came about.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. I'm hiding behind the column. So we, For the last 6 months, we've been working on researching our fees, what the airport costs us, and how much money we're spending extra versus what money we're making, what income we have from the sale of fuel out there and hangar leases. I then compared with other airports what kind of charges there's out there that are being charged, larger and smaller ones. And some of the fees don't exist at other airports, and like the key fob fees, for example, we have a powered gate out there that we maintain. It costs us $10,000 to have this powered gate there, along with all the electronics, and over the life cycle as a part of asset management, we got to prepare for replacing it as well. So we've added fees like that on a business model that would allow us to replace the items. Our airport in general has about $5 to $8 million worth of asset. And currently we're running a $93,000 a year deficit without any money being put aside into asset management replacement. This is just operational costs. So we're trying to level the field out there with reducing our services in some way, or finding alternative ways of managing the airport, while at the same time increasing some rates across the board to make the airport viable and somewhat self-sustainable in its own.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Butler?
Yeah, from the email that we've received from occupant out at the airport, and for people that are in the audience here today, I've learned that this increase is quite huge for them in their leases. For one point, I was talking with a mayor from Alberta the other week back who been reelected numerous times, and I asked him for a point of advice, and he said the best thing you can do as a representative is to be fair, to appear fair to the people. And this doesn't seem to be coming across as being fair. Yes, we are running a deficit at the airport, absolutely, and I've noticed that for a long time, and it does need to be addressed. But by raising fees and charges so extravagantly all at once does not seem fair to the people. And I would like to see them raised, but maybe incrementally over the next few years, so that it's more palatable to the people out there, and maybe look at reducing in other ways.
Councillor Ross and Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if you could just forgive me for this, but I don't know, what are the current rates that I'm looking at Schedule D, the airport fees and charges? What are the current rates? Because when I look at cost of storage facilities, just generally storage facilities, and we're looking at tie downs, for example, tie down space for an aircraft. Storage space generally in BC is $40 to $50 a month for a 5-foot storage unit. Once you get into a 20-foot space, you're looking at about $225 a month. So here we're looking at a tie down space for a small aircraft at $55 a month, or an annual rate of $550 a month, which is less than $50 a month if you look at the annual rate for an aircraft. So I think that's very reasonable for, if I can afford to own an aircraft, I think that is a pittance to pay. And I'm just wondering what we're comparing it to, because I don't know what I'm comparing this to.
Our manager of operations.
So the current rates are in each lease owner's agreement. So I believe they're $2.37 per meter.
So there's no comparative charts that are being shown here when we look at these.
There isn't a current chart. What brought this to the forefront was, if we didn't do something about the lease hangar agreements, the next 5 years were capped at a 0% increase.
So what approximately is the percentage then? Can you base it on that approximately? What were the increases percentage-wise?
I think
Mr. Mayor, so the, currently the rates are basically $2.37 per square meter for hangar owners. We're trying to get it up, like, so overall, a small hangar out there is about 120 square meters, which brings it to about $200 to $250 a year. So we're trying to bring it up to $4 right now and then increase it over 5 years, $1 per year. At the end of the day, that would still leave a hangar owner that has a 120 square foot hangar, a square meter hangar, with after 5 years at about an $800 to $1,000 charge. To have a current storage unit at WD sheet metal for a car or something like that costs over $100 a month. It is relatively cheap storage still out there, which doesn't overdo it. Some of the other fees, though, Councillor Ross, are in, there's the old fees and charges bylaw is attached, and there is an old Schedule D in there, I believe, that has some of the older fees. Again, I've collected from other airports some other ideas of how they're dealing with some of the same issues. Some airports haven't increased their rates either in a long, long time, and again, bringing it back to asset management, this is where we fall behind, and we can't keep up our current assets to appropriate standards and replacements.
Thank you very much. Now you've given a good answer on the overall big picture, which is what I wanted to see, not necessarily pinpointing anything. Councillor Crocker.
Yeah, I've always had a bit of a concern because ever since I've been on council, it's looks close to the $90,000 deficit every year. And some people would say, well, if we're running that much of a deficit, then should we even have an airport? And the answer to that is yes, we need an airport. I want an airport, and I have voted in the past to budget that so that deficit. My question through you to Mr. Drexler would be, if this is implemented in 2016, do we have an idea of what our deficit will be? Because we will still have a deficit, right? Even these raises, I was just curious, is it going to knock it down 10% or 50% or 15%?
Good question, Mr. Drexler.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. At the end of the day, we're hoping to slowly decrease the deficit. It's not going to be an overnight change where we'll see a huge change. We're also exploring other options for decrease our expenses in general. So to approach this from both sides, basically, like increase the income and decrease the expenses. At the end of the day, just by increasing the hangar fees, it's not going to do much. By 2020, it'll look a lot better once the fees are adjusted across the board. But overall, we currently make $11,000, I think, a year on hangar leases. Or leases in general, $6,000 from the Ministry of Forests out there and the wildfire, and $5,000 from the regular hangar lease owners. So it's not going to make a huge difference, but it's across the board, spreading the cost in between everybody that's involved and it has use of the asset out there that is the airport.
Thank you. So we will be showing some kind of a decrease in the deficit. That's the hope. Thank you. Councillor Butler and Councillor Thompson.
And there's a member of the audience. I'm just curious, how much do we receive each year from Regional District C and D and Interior Health for funding our airport?
Absolutely.
Nothing. It's a regional airport, surely we'd receive something from them.
Yeah, it's not a regional sport.
Right, but it benefits the whole region.
Definitely.
I'll have to interrupt you. Gentleman in the second row who's been patiently waiting, my apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council people. I've been at the airport for 17 years.
And you are?
And my name is Joseph Malatini. I've been at the airport for 17 years and very much appreciate the service and quality of everything there. It's just been great. I realize there needs to be an increase. But I'm afraid that these increases, when you try to segregate out-of-towners from city residents, you know, I think we should all ride on the same bus. That's what happens nowadays. I just have a suggestion. Our lease agreement now is $2.37 a square meter. I'm just suggesting for 2016, $3 a square meter, 2017, $3.50, 2018, $4, 2019, $4, 2020, $4.50. The fact about landing fees for the private owners is a sore point. I don't think that should happen, but it should happen for commercial operators at the airport. I think that they should have a landing fee charge. The question about liability insurance, we're at $2 million at the moment. This insurance isn't cheap. If it goes up to $5 million, the rate would, together with the hangar lease increases, you know, it would be a big burden on us private guys. So I'm just suggesting it either stays at 2 million, or for the private owners, maybe bring it down to 1 million, and the commercial operators, well, they pay a bit more since they're there all the time. The private owners of their airplanes maybe fly around 20 hours a year. Some of us take care of our lands around our hangars. We go around the airport and we put in time and to keep it clean, and yeah, we're proud of it. So there's a lot of things happening there that you don't see. As for the necessity of the airport, this summer is a good indication. We need the airport. There's a threat of a fire coming over the ridge. Everyone kicked in. I brought my water truck with 2,500 gallons and pump and hoses and just left them there in case it did break the ridge. That was no charge. We all do things to try and help out. As far as the Schedule D, the bylaws, I don't think that's a good idea to bring into the airport. I agree with the tie-down fees for outside aircraft, but maybe $30 a month. You know, I mean, we're talking Grand Forks, not Kelowna, not Nelson, not Penticton. This is Grand Forks. Even though it is a beautiful airport, we're still a small airport. And I think that the city should chase down any grants that are available to them from the government. I think we're missing out on some of that. Our leases in the schedule there, our leases were allowed unrestricted access to our hangars. I'd like to keep it that way since that's what we've signed. I agree with the maintenance on the electric gate. I agree with the charge of a yearly charge to help pay for that. There's also a clause in here on the Schedule D about unknown fees being charged to us. That has me a little bit worried on the Schedule D. Yeah, other services. Yeah, other services. I have no idea what that's about. You know, it's, anyway, there's that issue. I only found out about this 3 days ago. There was no mail outs. I'm an independent at the airport. There was nothing. I found out from someone else. I looked at the email. I'm not very good on the computer, so I wasn't able to get a copy of it, but I'm just going on memory here and what I wrote down. Why hasn't the land, there's been a proposal for airport lands for new hangars. Why hasn't the land been released so people can get on with building the new hangars? This would also bring you in some more revenue. So I don't understand why those lands haven't been released. We all have to follow rules down there, and maybe some self-policing might be a good idea. You're supposed to stop and wait at the gate so deer don't get in. It's very costly to get an animal out of the airport. We don't want that, but you should wait at the gate. There's signs there. Obey the rules. That's about all I have to say. I'm for an increase, but a fair one.
Have you done your studies comparatively based on other airports under similar situations?
Well, Penticton, Kelowna, they're big airports. They're quite a bit more expensive to have an airplane there.
You had mentioned we should go after grants. I agree with you there. But having said that, if we don't get the grants, who is supposed to support the cost of this? The taxpayers.
Yeah. Yeah, if they want protection against fires and emergencies, the Medivac comes in quite a bit.
But with all due respect, they don't all own airplanes.
No, but they should be paying a landing fee. The health system maybe should kick in some support. The regional district should maybe kick in a little bit. I mean, you can't go on, you can, but it would be a shame if you went after the few private guys that have been there the $95,000 deficit. Most airports run a deficit.
But with all due respect, having your own airplane, that is a luxury and a hobby you have, so you can't expect the taxpayers to fund it.
But owning your own airplane, I mean, if there's an emergency looking for someone, you've been out looking for them, if they're lost, or, there's many benefits.
I don't disagree with you on that, but I think you see where I'm coming from.
Yeah, but you need to also see that flying really is like playing baseball or playing soccer.
But to put it very simply, if we don't get our deficit down, it could come to the point, God forbid, that we may not have an airport then. So then you'd have nowhere to land.
No,
Put it that way.
then you'd have to pack up and go. But that is a reality.
But thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of things. How often does Medevac actually use the airport? Because I know that the helicopter comes in frequently to land at the hospital, helipad. They fly right over my house. So how often do we have any stats on the use of the airport by Medevac?
Thanks. We probably average between 25 and 35. This year was 35 medevacs into Grand Forks.
So that's over above the helicopters then coming in. Yeah, 90 some odd $1,000 in an operating deficit to be borne by all the taxpayers of the community is substantial. And I hear what the what's been said by one of the pilots, and I've read the concerns expressed in the letter and the brochure from COPA. And I can understand their concerns, but when I look at these costs, I personally, and I don't have an airplane, I don't think they're exorbitant. I think they're quite reasonable.
Gentleman in the back row.
Fran, my question's about night landings, because Grand Forks has a night landing capability. I'd like to know how many night landings there were, for instance, last year. How many of those were by private airplanes? How many were by commercial airplanes? And did each one of those parties cover their costs of the night landing system?
Which one would you like to have answered first? Our manager of operations.
That's a difficult one to answer. Our airport person that looks after day-to-day stuff at the airport volunteers his time to go out there and turn the lights on so that local pilots can, practice and get certification in night flight landing. The majority are medevac night flight, but the exact number I don't have with me. I would imagine it's, if I had to throw something out there, I would say it's probably around half of the time. But I could definitely get those numbers if council wishes.
Thank you.
Do they
That-
cover their costs? So they do?
Does that answer your question, sir?
We don't get any cost recovery from medevac right now, currently.
Is there any cost recovery on any night landings?
I don't believe so. Is there?
We had one this year that we got cost recovery just due to a pilot in a miscalculation was coming here late and asked or requested that we have somebody go out and turn the lights on, which we did. But other than that, no cost recovery.
Lady in the back row.
Ellen McDonald. I find it unfortunate, Mr. Mayor, that a group could be considered well-to-do and possible source of revenue, which is not really very fair. We agree that the costs should go up, but this is very onerous. We aren't rich, but one of our hobbies happens to be the plane. We don't criticize people for having an expensive truck or trailer. They're not assessed undue costs. And we feel that this is not appropriate to, as part of the argument for raising the fees.
My apologies if you deemed it that way, but the only intention I was saying, other people have hobbies, kayaking, it has nothing to do with the monetary issue. I was not pointing out to the fact because you own an airplane that you were rich. It's just there's hobbies that people have, and the rest of the community cannot be burdened with the tax element of it. That was my only point there.
Excuse me, sir, but if a hunter has an accident out in the bush, his hobby sometimes costs us a lot of money when we have to go and rescue them. So there are instances where the cost is borne by the community for people's hobbies.
Yes, if you care to assimilate it in that context, yes. Gentleman behind the cameras.
Les Johnson, GFTV. Two things, the night landing system, it's my understanding that in the past we've had, and there is also a fixed version of a night landing system where the planes coming in can turn the lights on themselves, which means that we don't have to have a city worker go out and 4 hours charged to us to turn the lights on. I don't know whether that system is actually working now because it was just rebuilt and went through as I understand it, a 30-day testing, and then nothing was filed with the federal government in terms of the system, so it's not working. So yes, when people come in at nighttime, a city worker has to go out there and turn on the lights, but it doesn't have to be that way. 15 years ago, they put in a system that made that not be needed, that a plane could turn it on by itself with no cost to us. But for some reason, the city treats the airport like a loss. That's it, period. Number two, I've talked to a couple of the business owners out there. Unlike things like the pool and the rec center, the arena, this is a shared facility that, well, the regional district should be paying into because it's the only place where planes can land for air ambulance and stuff like that, but they don't pay into it. But unlike a lot of the other facilities, businesses can exist out there too, and that benefits us in our economy. But as I'm talking with them, they see these changes in a negative light. And we were going to have a new business move out to the airport from the lake. That hasn't happened. I'm not sure of the reasons for that. But if the climate that you create for businesses and people at the airport is onerous enough, you'll find, and I've heard this from businesses out there, that they will just fold their tents and move somewhere else where it's more congenial to them. And then you will end up with an airport that is only used for two things: night flight or medical flights and how does it proceed? Rich people who have expensive toys, and yes, you'll end up having to lean on those so-called rich people with their expensive toys for all of the costs, and it'll become even more onerous. So eventually, what are we gonna do? Oh, let's see, we'll have drag races to help offset the costs. That's the kiss of death for an airport. I'm just pointing out that this is a facility where businesses can run, but you're not making it, they look like, to you, like you're not making it very welcoming for them. You're making it the opposite. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our manager of operations and Mr. Drexler, Nelson has a really small little airport, air landing strip. And I know there's some small aircraft that are tethered there. I'm just wondering if you looked at their fees, because it also provides a lot of essential services for the city of Nelson, which is twice the size of our city, but it's still, a small regional airport. And so just question number one, and I would like to also propose that I still don't think that the tie down charges that are being proposed here are terribly outlandish based on what it costs to store anything, whether you have an RV that you can't put in your driveway, so you're gonna have to get a storage unit, or we've had people come to council who've had RVs and they've actually had to build on their own property a storage facility for their RV, which is quite a substantial cost, and it's a large space. So there is a cost to storing. We make choices as human beings about where we invest our money, whether it be an RV or ATV or an airplane, or in my case, a little kayak that just sits on my front porch and might live in the barn for the winter. So it's, these are choices we make. And I don't believe that the choices I make should be downloaded to the rest of the community. Plane is essentially, like you said, a hobby mostly, and that sometimes you might use it to do some community work by looking for somebody who's lost in the woods. I don't know. And is there a liability? You just can't go do search and rescue. People just can't start doing search and rescue because that gets in the way of the actual search and rescue. So I question that. So I do want to look at maybe doing a graduated increase in the tie down rates. And I'd also like to know, comparatively speaking, how would we measure up to someplace like the city of Nelson? And if people do pack up and go somewhere else, Mr. Johnson, where are they going to go? There aren't that many nice little airports in this community that are going to be cheaper than ours, even with the increased rates.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. I have one question for either Mr. Reid or Mr. Drexler. When was the last increase of any rates? How long has it been? Just approximately 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
For the lease rates, for example, the original lease rates were put in place in 1999 and 2000 at $2 and a couple cents, I think, and it's been increased to $2.37 somewhere over the years, but I can't honestly pinpoint when that was. This could have also just had something to do with the change in tax rates or something like that, that there was a little increase from GST or PST or anything like that on that amount.
Thank you.
And I'd like my questions.
Yeah, in regards to the Nelson Airport, I did look at their fees. However, it's really hard to compare their airport to ours. Our airport has all this night flight system in place. The Nelson Airport doesn't. So we have the extra lights, the extra beacons. So when I did my calculations based on increases or potential increases and the amount of assets that we have, I looked at every single item that has to do with our airport and making our airport viable, and the beacon sites, the night flight equipment, the RCAL system, all of that stuff was basically calculated in, which I can't compare to Nelson. So I needed to have a little higher rates than Nelson just to make up for the difference in our equipment that we have as a total for that asset.
What about our storage compared to Nelson? Tie downs and storage?
Tie downs and storage is cheaper across the board. We would be probably one of the more expensive ones for the smaller airports, but we're by far cheaper than others. We did some research in regards to assorted airports out there. The $2.37 right now are really cheap per square meter. For most airports like Kelowna and bigger, you're looking at $1,000 to $1,500 per year minimum for your. So we're going to be cheaper still compared to that, but for the smaller ones, we're going to be probably more on the expensive side. And again, I would say part of the asset is our night flight system. There's nothing else in between Kelowna and Cranbrook. There's actually people for medevac being transported here from Nelson to use our airport. And they're definitely not being charged anything for flying out of here, so.
No, I understand the concept because of the overall big picture with all the other services that we offer. You had to incorporate it somehow. Thank you. The gentleman in the second row.
Mr. Mayor, the last increase was 2012. Went up to $2.37.
From $2 to $2.37.
2012 was the last.
Not from $2, it was $2.7. So the increase was what?
How much was that?
37 cents per square meter.
37 cents.
3 years ago. Okay. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a clarification. I'm looking at, on my agenda here on the computer, page 84 of 100. Are those the previous charges for the airport? Or are they the current ones? Are they the current ones or are they the proposed ones?
The current ones in the fees and charges bylaw.
That you're proposing? Because I'm just looking here, I'm seeing tie downs based on $45 per month, which is a different, in a different format from, let me go back up here. Yeah, that was bylaw 1958. I'm just getting confused on what we're proposing here.
Thank you. We're still talking about the fees and charges bylaw. And I think what we're talking about is there's a couple of changes that are identified in the fees and charges bylaw. But are these are the current ones that are existing in the fees and charges, in the airport bylaw? This is in the fees and charges bylaw. So then we have the proposals coming. This is the current. Do we have the proposals coming into this bylaw as well? Or are we just adding the airport service in the fees and charges bylaw?
Sorry, I think I may have confused things a bit. There currently is no airport bylaw, but there is a schedule for airport fees currently in the fees and charges bylaw. So that is being updated.
So that
with
is
the, yes,
okay.
correct.
So you're, I'm sorry, beg your indulgence. So what you're proposing then, currently, I'm going to use tie down because that's easy. Currently, it's $45 per month.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
In the fees and charges bylaw, if you look at
Item 4.
tie down space number 4 is $45 per month. What you're proposing for 2016 is to increase that to $55 per month. That's what I wanted to make clear. So there are charges, these are not new charges, they are just increased recommendations. Thank you.
The lady in the back row and then Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question to the
Manager
person who
Walker.
wrote this document. I'd like to know, first of all, why resident and non-resident has been differentiated, and how you plan to do that. Decide who's going to pay twice the amount.
To our manager of operations. Just a quick question on that question, if I may. Does that not work on the same parameters as if you get an out of province or out of country fishing license? Do we use the same concept?
Mr. Mayor, that was in the current fee schedule for city residents and non-city residents. So that was just carried forward to the new fees and charges proposal.
And how do you propose?
Excuse me. Yeah, you can see it in all varieties of community owned assets. Some places have a user fee for people that are not members of the community. So in other words, the taxpayers of the city pay for the airport, as well as the people that have hangars and leases and stuff. So it's not unusual that you would have a higher fee for somebody who is not bringing anything into the airport except that airplane.
Excuse me, sir, we pay taxes as well as the lease.
That's what I said.
Yes.
Sorry.
So because we live at Christina Lake, then we would be considered a non-resident despite the fact that we pay taxes to the city.
Sorry.
Is that fair?
But you have a hangar, it's not your land.
They pay land taxes.
We pay a land tax.
Yes.
And a building tax.
After this is
To the city.
this is.
Councillor Butler.
Just for clarification, on page 84, where we were before, it says that the leases right now are $500 for a resident and $1,000 for a non-resident. Is that what the lease is right now, or I thought that was the proposed rate? Because what I'm hearing from the members of the public is that their leases are going to go from about $300 to about $1,000. It's a jump of approximately $700 for them. But I'm just curious because this previous one makes it look like their lease is already $1,000. How am I not reading that right?
So the permanent FBO there, that's for a fixed-based operator. So this would be like for a commercial entity where they would be leasing land at the airport for anything, for bare land leases. So that has nothing to do with the hangar leases. The hangar leases themselves are basically $2.37 a square meter right now. The average size that we got out at the airport is about 120 square meters. So total cost currently is $250 per year. With the $4 increase, that would probably bring us up to maybe $400 to start per year. And then over the years, it would increase possibly to up to $700 to $800 by 2020.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Richard. So these rates are not new. These rates are already included in a different bylaw. Some of them are new, yes, I agree. But basically what you're doing is you're taking the schedule from the previous bylaw and moving it into the airport fees and charges bylaw as part of all of the fees and charges that the city levies, other than property taxes and utility rates.
Mr. Reed.
Sorry, that's what I didn't explain correct at the beginning. We don't have the airport bylaw currently, but there was a limited schedule in the fees and charges bylaw. So the fees and charges Schedule D has been expanded to include, when we met with COPA, the Flying Club, they expressed certain things that they would like. One of them was the electric gate. So we're trying to accommodate, and so we said, okay, well, we'll keep it as is, change the access in and out of the electrical gate, and you would get a key fob. For that, you would pay a certain fee a year as one of the changes. But there are a few changes that we are proposing that aren't currently attached to the fees.
You're still entertaining other proposals.
So,
So,
I'm sorry.
with all due respect, we're gonna have to cut this short. We're just beating it to
One
death.
more quick thing. I promise.
So you have discussed these particular rates with the local flying club?
No.
Did I understand you on that?
We had 2 or 3 meetings with some of the representatives from COPA. We mainly focused the discussions around the fact that we have a large deficit and how are we going to try to fix it. So things like the regional district not paying anything right now has been tossed around, but that's outside our realm of what we can deal with directly. But we did discuss the increase of the hangar rates, the per square meter leases, and after the discussion where we laid out the dollar amounts, they seemed, they weren't super happy, but they understood why the fees were there and why it had to increase. And we didn't discuss every detail in the plan over 5 years on how to increase the different rates and stuff. There was some discontent about some of the fees, like the key fobs and the gate was one of the big ones. But again, they agreed at the end that it's probably a necessary thing in the big picture of the asset management piece for the airport.
To the gentleman in the second row, and this will be the third to last question.
Mr. Mayor and council people, we have not been contacted on these proposals at any time. Not all of us are in the flying club. I think that there are a few of us who are independent of the flying club.
And my suggestion would be to bring this forward in writing and to discuss it further possibly with some of the items. Councillor Butler.
On page 75 there, the new rates and fees, it says that annual land lease fees to be calculated at 15% of assessed value of the land or the minimum annual fee, whichever is greater. So it sounds like because of the square footage, the minimum annual fee then would be $1,000 because that's what's greater, right? So if their property now was being assessed at what you said, $2.73 or whatever per square foot, and it would go up to $400. It would actually go up to $1,000 because that's what's greater.
This is for the fixed-based operations. So this is like for a commercial entity. If they would want to lease bare lands, like this has strictly to do with bare land leases. Nothing with the hangar leases. The hangar leases are further down, right there in the bottom section.
Sorry.
Okay, before we close on this, can I just make a recommendation? Councillor Ross, do you have a?
Yeah, I did have a couple of little.
Okay.
Okay, so just as a segue back into my question about comparing it to other airports in towns or cities comparable in size to ours, it sounds like there's nothing out there that we can reasonably compare it to because we have such an amazing airport for the village of our city of our size. So that is amazing, and that's an asset that I think we should really be celebrating, that, you know, maybe that'll attract more people to our region who also share this love of airplane hobby. But I also heard that when we said that the current charges were $45 for tie-down space, that somebody here in the gallery said was zero.
Yeah.
But if it's zero, does that mean that we're not imposing the charges that we have on our rates, on our rate schedule, and that we're omitting that from our lease agreement? So we've actually failed to collect the what we have in our fee and charge schedules. We're failing to actually collect that. Is that the case? And when they say it's actually zero?
To our CAO.
Mr. Mayor, we don't staff a person out there because that would only add to the cost. So that would be $100,000 cost to our operation annually that the airport folks would then have to incur. So it's incumbent upon them to come forward when they do tie down and tell us. We talked a little bit about the honesty and proactiveness around this, and them coming forward to us and saying, I'm tying down today, here's your $45 coming to the city hall and paying for that, when they exercise those options. And when our staff comes out there to be able to communicate with them, that's where it's not working. Because if they're not paying, they're not coming in and paying at City Hall when they do tie down their planes at the airport. So it's incumbent upon them to come in and pay. So that's all I can say right now, is because we can't afford to have somebody out there operating the airport full time, because we need that staff person, cover their holidays, and deal with all of those costs. So we'd be in at a 1.5 staff persons out there to be able to cover that.
So people can just take off and land and take off at their willy-nilly.
Yeah, or else our costs go up annually even more.
But I'm talking about the permanent residents here who have a plane hangared at the airport. They're not paying either?
I don't believe it.
The hangars are, yes.
They're paying for the hangar, but they're not paying for the actual tie-down space.
No, the
That
tie-down
is-
is outside.
It's outside, it's like docking, it's like a boat.
Right, I know what talking.
Yeah.
So people with hangars are just using the hangar.
Yeah.
So I have a question on the table. The motion was to open it for discussion. All in favor of that motion? So carried. And I make a recommendation to council to have a motion put forward that we engage regional districts to participate in the cost sharing of this airport, seeing as Brookfield.
I'll put that motion forward.
Councillor Thompson, second. Councillor Crop. You're not 30 yet, obviously.
No, I'm not thirding it. It's fine to make that motion, but it's something that I've kind of been working on. I'm trying to gather information from the ambulance service and try and get the local ambulance service for support. It needs to be a regional, not a regional airport, but it needs to be regionally funded. And in discussions with BCAS, there was lots to talk about. We do get a lot of patient transfers into Grand Forks to be flown out, right? And there's no income coming from that, but those residents may be from Trail. And if we have to send somebody from Trail, because we've sent people from Grand Forks to Trail, and then they come back to Grand Forks to fly out. But if Trail, the regional hospital, has to send us somebody to fly out, then they've actually failed. That they cannot handle that injury or that medical condition. If I went tomorrow, if we had a board meeting, if I go to the next board meeting and just say, well, here's some figures, we need everybody in the regional district to put in $40,000 to help subsidize the airport, which benefits everybody, it would die right there. Right? You need, no, I just picked a number just for the hell of it, but it's delicate. But by making this motion, that may give us, allow staff to get some more information that then I can put forward a stronger case. Because I think not only the regional district, but IHA, and they don't own the ambulance service, they don't control the ambulance service, but the province as well. And everybody needs to pay their fair share, right? So.
Yes, I think the nature of the motion is not to basically put a gun to their head, but
Oh,
to
no,
start
no.
negotiations with them to see if, we can work something out, as you had mentioned, because they do use the airport too. So,
Yeah, I'm just saying that
No, I
we need to get some
yes,
more background information
absolutely.
before we bring it forward, or
Yeah.
it'll just get kicked back.
Councillor Ross.
Yeah, and they need some more background information as well. Like, are they clear on how much it costs the taxpayers of Grand Forks to maintain this state-of-the-art facility that they benefit from? So they need a nice little one-pager, something simple. This is not rocket science. To let them know the actual cost to the taxpayers of Grand Forks for them to have access to this facility, and then invite them to suggest a dollar figure that they think is worth for their communities. How much can they put in? We're not talking $40,000. Can they put in $7,500 a year? Something like, I'm just, for the hell of it. But ask them what it's worth to their taxpayers.
40,000, 50.
Yeah, right. Then we're gonna get some turbos in.
Let's say we gotta start some dialogue,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, but
With
that's not,
facts.
yeah, let's not be ridiculous.
No.
Counselor Thompson?
No.
And then the gentleman in the back.
Councillor Ross, your worship, through you to Councillor Ross, would you accept a friendly amendment to your motion? And that is that Councillor Krog be requested to
Can I throw something in?
Yeah.
I could maybe ask that staff prepare a report that outlines some of our operating costs that could be shared by the regional district, because, you know, Councillor Krog said he was reaching out to the ambulance service. Maybe we could do all that work and pull that together and provide a report that would be received to council, that would be referred then over to the regional district, and they could potentially consider placing that tax burden, sharing that tax burden on the regional members in our area.
Exactly, I was just gonna suggest that rather than make Councillor Krog the messenger. Get staff to
It's a good
report it.
shot.
Councillor Ross?
Yeah, just to reiterate, can we make this report very, very simple? Not something that's onerous on our staff. There's a lot even here that can just be cut and paste into a very simple report that is easy to understand, so that it shows the value of the service and appeals to their common sense to realize that they have a vested interest in supporting this valued service.
Now, to the gentleman in the back.
Just a quick suggestion. It's not a regional airport, but it's a regional asset. So maybe you could approach the regional district that way and say, look, it's a regional asset. We're gonna crack the asset management whip on your butts because we're the poster child for asset management in the province. That's all.
So, Councillor Ross, would you like to rephrase the motion rather than form an engagement with them or consultation, maybe dialogue with the staff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, but can you tell me what my first motion was, and then I'll decide what I'm gonna amend it to?
What motion?
I move that the city of Grand Forks prepare what? I don't even know what my first motion was, like.
You just make it.
I didn't, I just said, yeah, whatever you said,
It was consult.
because you're not allowed to do it, so I did it for you.
Exactly,
So-
so just to consult with regional, engage them into a cost sharing program, but at this point, we should direct it to staff, form a report.
Well, that's,
We'll just
No, there's no
withdraw your
adding that.
motion and I'll read it.
We never.
what?
Yeah, you
Never.
did, you made a motion, I
Yeah.
seconded it.
I know what it was, I was just saying what you
We'll
said.
just withdraw.
I'm trying to get this onto the table. I move that,
Let's have our,
yeah, let's do it.
Mr. Mayor, what we have down here is resolved to engage the regional district, including boundary, to participate in discussions with regard to sharing costs regarding the airport.
Okay, but I can just have a further, be it resolved that the council directs staff to develop a brief report to outline the,
yeah, we don't have to amend it, we just add it on.
yeah, therefore, and be it further resolved that the council directs staff to compile a brief report outlining the cost sharing benefits to the local airport.
We don't want a whole page motion.
That's good. That's good.
You got it.
Thanks. Any more discussion? Councillor Butler?
And just to clarify that this will be a report done in-house by staff and not by consultants.
That's what I said, staff.
I said staff once before in the report, and Councillor Rashagan made me aware of the fact that I need to be careful when I do that because it cost us $6,000.
Right, well, I said staff.
So noted. The lady in the second row.
Gloria Cook, can we have, it sounds like we need more communication between the operators of the airport, the owners, operators, whatever, and the people who use it regarding fees and so on. These people didn't seem to know what some of these amounts were. So we need for,
Well, that's I mentioned earlier that they could approach staff or whoever and do something in writing,
Yeah.
some of their proposals or requests so the dialogue can be open. And for CAO?
Mr. Mayor, and further to that is, the committee of the whole meeting is where we introduce it onto the table. So
Yes.
council might say that we need to do more dialogue with the residents, or they might say, there's not enough, or there's too much dialogue. They might make another or suggestion is, can we just move forward with, say, for instance, the downtown densification piece? It's a balance of that. So this is where council gets to make the decision on how that happens. So it's part of the mechanism of committee of the whole.
And the recommendation is only proposed fees and charges in the bylaw, which will be done on the 26th. This point. To the gentleman in the second row.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council people. I think a good airport to compare Grand Forks with would be Creston.
Creston.
Nelson is not really a comparable airport.
Okay, does Creston pretty much have the same geographic?
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So the question is on the table, the original one, which is the council to give the first three readings of the proposed fees and charges amendment bylaw 1958A1 at the October 26th regular meeting of council. All in favor of that motion? What?
I have a motion on the floor.
You have the motion for the
report.
so all in favor of that motion? So carried. Then we have the other question still sitting there, which was originally made forward. Do I have a motion for that? Yeah, I think.
Is there a motion?
Direct back to our. Yeah. Mhm. So the recommendation is still there, we have the option that we can defer.
Yes, I would make a motion that, that this, report, and bylaw be deferred until we're brought back at the November committee of the whole meeting, if that's gonna be fine.
Well, are you saying the report to the other motion that was already gone past? I'm talking about this motion with the proposed fees and charges.
So, Mr. Mayor, one of the things we have to be cognizant of is if we don't make a decision before December 31st, they lock in for 5 years on their lease rates at the minimum levels, right? So then you've agreed to lock them in for 5 more years at the lower levels. So
We bring it back,
we'll have to bring it back prior to the October or the December 31st timeline, and then it'd have to be, then it would come to a regular council meeting at that.
I just don't want to, I don't want to, put, an onus on staff I want to give you sufficient time to prepare what you need to prepare. And, if we did that, we could always give 3 readings at, end of November, meeting, and if we had to have a special meeting to finally adopt it.
I think it would take some time for us to try to get on the council agenda for the community or the regional district agenda so we could present it to them and then see if Councilor Crog could line that up for us with myself to see if we could line that up to present it to the regional board on our findings and what we found.
I think we should move forward with this one then.
You can always hold it off too. You don't have to pass it at the regular council meeting. If you decide to recommend this forward, it gives you the opportunity to table it at the 26th, on the 26th. You're not committing to do anything. You're just saying you're gonna move it on to council, and then the council will make the final decision because realistically, council is the governing body. That's right.
So just pass the resolution as, I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second? Councilor Burke. Discussion. Councilor Butler, from the team, second.
Yeah, I just think that because this has been a shock to the ratepayers out at the airport, and there has been so much discussion and on it today, I would like to see it discussed a bit further as well, as Councillor Thompson had stated. So I don't think I could recommend sending it to regular council meeting when there still needs to be more discussion on it.
In the second.
Donna Semenoff, I have a question regarding changes in fees for someone who's visiting Grand Forks in an airplane. I know some people do travel from one community to another to visit one time, and I'm seeing these charges are per month or per year. That's in the proposed one as compared to the past. So I'd like clarity on what it would cost someone to visit one time with their airplane, come and go to a restaurant here, someone from Kelowna. I know I've come across people doing that in Midway and other places. So just clarity on how much it would cost them to visit Grand Forks one time.
Oh, my landing.
yearly, daily? Just like $20, is that right, David? Is landing fee $20? Or
That's for commercial.
commercial?
Yeah, for the private, recreational flyer, we're trying to promote coming to Grand Forks, so we didn't have an overnight landing fee or anything like that. It's based on longer term monthly fees and such.
So, Councilor Ross?
Just to, so we're not stalling this entire process with all of the recommendations here, can we somehow pass this and exclude Schedule D? Because Schedule D seems to be the sticking point. So just exclude the sticking point and move forward with the rest of these recommendations.
Councilor Thompson?
Through you to Councilor Ross, if we were to do that, then as our CEO has said, we run the risk of locking in for 5 years at what is currently is currently in place. So I couldn't support deleting Schedule D. I think that is an integral part of the fees and charges bylaw. And I think we need to proceed with the recommendation that it be forwarded to the next not tonight's regular meeting, but the October 26th regular meeting of council. And at that time, hopefully there will be some additional information that we will be able to consider.
Yeah, that would have been my recommendation. Okay. So, all in favor of that motion? All opposed? So carried. Moving on to item 6B, Manager of Operations, again, bylaw 2022, RFP Manager of Operations. And the subject matter is Airport Regulation Bylaw number 2022. Mr. Reed.
So currently, we do not have an airport bylaw, so we've looked at a few different smaller airports and kind of compiled an industry standard to come to council with. We did discuss this with COPA. It was circulated amongst their membership, and we did get their feedback and made some changes. There was one part that one of the hangar owners mentioned earlier that was, or could use some clarifying. The insurance of $2 million is correct for the private hangar owners. The commercial was $5 million, so that could be clarified.
Well, that's a big relief for.
So the recommendation is that the Committee of the Whole receives the report and further directs staff to present to council the first 3 readings of the proposed bylaw 2022 at the October, I believe that should read 26th. Yeah, instead of 27th, at the regular meeting of council. May I have a motion for that? Councilor Thompson, do I have a second? Councilor Ross? If there is no discussion, is there a discussion? Yes. Okay, Councilor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm trying to find my note, maybe it's in my actual hard copy notes. I'm just noticing in the bylaw, the building code, that it says that you're not allowed to use Quonsets. Where does it say that there? Quonsets are not allowed. Help me here, where was that? 27?
9.1.
Yeah, Quonsets are a really, popular building in many rural and non-rural airports. They're strong, they're windproof, they're inexpensive to build, they're last. I mean, I've seen Quonsets that have been around for 70 years. On the prairies? Why don't we allow Quonsets?
So what we did is we compiled the airport bylaw from 2 different airports that were rather recent, and I had the building inspection department also review this particular bylaw, as well as the emergency services. We had several different departments have input in it, and nobody has yet flagged this, but it's something we can definitely review.
Oh, sorry.
Councilor Ross?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, as we have this amazing asset and we'd like to attract potentially more people to the community who like it, this is an incentive for them to be here, I would like to have that struck from this building, this bylaw, that we say no Quonsets. I don't know what what is that, arch crib? I don't know what that is. Is that a symbol? It sounds like a Quonset to me, but it seems like an unreasonable, restriction.
I think before we strike something like this, we should look into it under the building code of BC and also our building inspector
Sure. Quonsets.
and to our CEO.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that we found too is there's some people that actually live at the airport. So they're not conforming. So we just want to make sure we don't end up with like residences along with the intended hangar uses. I understand there's somebody that lives upstairs in one of the hangars, and that's at $2.37 a square meter. So they're paying $230 a year in rent. And that's pretty cheap when it comes down to the overall piece. So we just want to make sure there is no misunderstandings on this. If we think of this from a residential perspective, I think this is what we're trying to remove is any residential expectations at the airport. If there's an innovative way to build a hangar, I think that we want to be able to bring that forward and be innovative that way.
And if we bring that forward, what's the liability towards the city then if we allow this by this type of thing?
Well, I think once we get into that zoning piece, or if it's a zoning bylaw issue, or if it becomes a building code deviation, if we're going to make a specific standard in our community, then we would bring that forward for our council to make that specific standard. So I think that, I think there's a bit of an argument on both sides, whether the building code, whether we need to say it now or whether we can do it later. We just simply say we're following the BC building code. It just clarifies all aspects.
Gentleman in the second row.
Sir, council people, the bonus of having someone living at the airport is they keep hooligans away. They hear anything happening, they call 911 or the police. There's a bonus to having someone living there. And Quonsets, on the subject of Quonset style buildings, they're kind of ugly. I think all the buildings should be metal clad, as suggested by the manager, and conform to the existing construction that's already there.
Very good point. Thank you. Councilor Ross?
I've seen very few Quonsets that weren't made out of metal, corrugated iron. And as long as we have a clear building code there, potentially that they have to be clad in metal, then I think that takes care of it. Quonsets don't have, I've seen some really ugly square machinery buildings or just square box buildings that are clad in metal. We need maybe another building code here in terms of what the facade of the building has to be, but you can still have a very attractive Quonset that's covered in corrugated iron.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Addressing it to our.
Yeah, it's not the Quonset structure that becomes the issue, it's the shape of the building. And the wider you get to the aircraft wing, so the aircraft will fit in, the building becomes tall. And from the airport, from center line of airport, you have to maintain 1.5% clear glide slope. So they become too tall to use within that scope of, they'd have to be moved way back off the property in order to get that clearance. So that's the biggest problem with Quonset.
And if I may just add, this has all been addressed by staff and management and the building inspector. So
Dan,
we're kind of
we've
stepping
looked
over.
through these, yeah.
That's council. The lady in the second row.
Gloria Cook again. I had a question I'd forgotten about. I wanted to know about the UAV drone fly zone, and does it just encompass the airport? And in your drawing or your picture at the back, can Can you explain that? And also, I was curious or wondering, with a drone and its picture-taking abilities, how much further than these boundaries of this, for example, the fly zone, does that take in? And what is allowed in that department, in that area of picture taking? There are people who live down near by the airport, and so how does that picture taking ability of drones figure into your fly zone and its borders, its area around it?
If I may, I would have to comment on my point is it's unknown. The equipment out there today, the technology goes leaps and bounds. At one point, it could take a picture 2 miles. At this point, that's beyond our scope. We just have the parameters working flying, unless I'm wrong.
Yeah.
At this point, we can't go any further to
Yeah, I was just wondering if
speculate.
anybody considered that issue or that problem possibly, or whatever, in your regulations and your, what you know about these things.
I'll address that to our manager of operations, but I would feel that it's beyond our scope of knowledge, the abilities of the unit.
The UAV fly zone is in the bylaw because we have a business out at the airport that currently has the clearance to fly. And they cannot fly over houses or certain criteria attached with their permit to be able to fly. So council has approved the business license, I guess. And so this just highlights the fact of where they can fly, not over any buildings or anything like that.
But I believe the question was how far the range could be while they're in that fly zone. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's what I.
Well, that's unknown.
Yeah,
That's an unknown at this point.
yes.
The gentleman in the back.
As I understand it, that's, the business is there to form a training area for pilots and drones. It's, I don't think that they can actually fly high enough to overlook a big area because they have limitations on how high they can go within that space. But you're right, because cameras change, side looking, et cetera.
And our allowance to go further in that is beyond our jurisdiction.
That's right,
because
yeah.
It's a federal issue at that point. Do we have any other questions or concerns? Question is on the table, I believe. No, it isn't. May I have a motion to receive the report and further direct staff to present to council first 3 readings of the proposed bylaw 2020. Yes, I did have it on the table. Yeah, 26 instead of 27. So if there's no other further discussions or questions, all in favor? So carried. All right, we have no information or correspondence, so no late items. We will now move on to question period from the public. Oh, the gentleman in the back.
This isn't so much a question as a comment on businesses at the airport, the UAV, et cetera. At the second meeting, while we had this big smoke situation going on, where they were worrying about ember fall coming from the spire south of us, we couldn't fly. The helicopters were grounded. They weren't flying in there, but everybody was supposed to be on guard for ember fall creating fires in the valley and we had little patrols going out trying to keep that under control, see if something's going on. Well, if that UAV that they have out at that company were allowed to fly autonomously, which it's not allowed to right now, but they do this in other countries, Indonesia, for example, which has much, much worse fire situations than we have. It could have literally flown a track pattern and told you exactly where to GPS coordinates there were embers sitting on the ground because it has an infrared camera that costs more than my car. And it's specifically made to do things like that. But no, here, if you got a drone, I got a shotgun, I get why Mr. Wade said that, but literally, in the future, technology like that will save our bacon if this becomes a new normal, because we will not be able to fly an airplane around looking for this stuff, and people on the ground aren't going to catch it. But a drone could fly without distraction until the batteries wear out. That's what I wanted to point out.
But has that concept been accepted yet by federal aviation to lead what you're saying?
Yeah. Regulation is still in the process of evolving. And having drones fly autonomously, especially in over areas where people live, is still a big no-no. But this technology just gets better and things will change over time. This is a company that's literally on the cutting edge. They've got a lot of money. It's not toys that they're doing here. They're involved in commercial enterprise for doing things like this. They were actually involved with the fire service to look at hotspot stuff. And that kind of went at Cropper when the Yo-Yo and Soyuz did the thing with this toy and got all the helicopters grounded. Eventually they did come to some arrangement to carry on with that after the fact. But, you know, this is a business. This is one of those businesses that is high tech, and it's here. This is one of 2 or 3 airports in all of Canada that allows UAV operations within the area, and that's because they worked really hard for well over a year to lobby the federal government to get that allowed here. I mean, they're trying to do it all right and everything. And having the highest civil servant in the area say something like, if you got a drone, I got a shotgun. I'm sorry, that's just sending a complete wrong message. Drones are gonna save our bacon someday because of this, because the helicopters won't be up there. That's all I wanted to point out.
Good point, and as a city, we do applaud the business for coming to Grand Forks and choosing Grand Forks. Gentleman in the second row.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, one more question, and council people. At the moment, our lease at the airport states that we're allowed unlimited access to our, unrestricted access to our hangars. I understand that, would it be possible to apply for a parking spot next to my hangar? I don't mind paying for that while I'm there. I wonder if I could direct that question to that airport manager.
Our manager of operations, Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are looking at different options around parking because that is one of the issues with the hangar owners. They want to keep their vehicle inside the fenced area. So we are looking at different options with parking like a specified area, but that's not out of the question. So if you can add that to your written suggestions to us, we'll take that into account.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah. Any other questions from the gallery? Second reading, the second row.
Okay, sorry. Not a question, but I wanted to give you a little bit of information around the fire time and all these embers and things coming down. We live out in areas that are dry, and we found many dropped dead pieces of, as in there was no evidence of them being alive when they touched down on the ground in these dry areas. So I was very pleased actually to see in the areas where we checked around where it's very dry where we are, that was the case. They were coming down dead.
What?
The embers and the pieces of
okay.
the pieces of the trees and the moss and the branches and so on are the pieces of. So, you know, where we live could have been a large. There was a potential for a large problem there had they been alive, most of them. In this case, they weren't, so that was nice.
To the lady in the second row.
I did a little bit of research provincially, what our provincial government, what the policies were regarding firefighting. And it wasn't long ago that they used to fight fires pretty quickly so they wouldn't expand. But they found that a lot of fuel was building up in the forests. So they were starting to let the forests burn, and that increases our safety. So the places where the fire has been, are less of a fire risk for the future. So I know it was a tough year, but we actually in some ways are safer for the fuel that was burned off. The other thing I wanted to talk about had to do with the water meters, and there's still some confusion about why the amount of leakage coming out of our main pipes wasn't evaluated as was suggested. When I looked at the reports and what I saw, I could make a guess that it was because council might have thought they could get some money applying for specific water meter grants, but they didn't get them. And now we're looking at spending the money out as the gas tax savings, which can be used for different things. I'm still concerned as a resident because what I read made sense to me about the best way for us to make cost-effective decisions and to decrease the waste of our water. So as long as we continue to choose to do it differently in the order of putting water meters in first, if we do have that large leakage, which we don't know about because it wasn't evaluated, then we're spending a lot of money to chlorinate and the electricity. We're pumping all that water, and it could potentially be draining out of those cities' main pipes. So I appeal to you to at least get clarity on why not address that, the financial issue and the environmental issue. And the engineers clearly said, find out the percentage leakage a certain way with certain data, and then after you've addressed that issue, if it's less than 15%, then you can consider putting in the rest of the water meters. So they had what they felt was most cost effective and most environmentally responsible. And those things are important to me as a resident. So I wanted to please ask you if there is any confusion to get clarity in your decision making.
The water meters, the majority of them are already in, and the rest will be in, and I'm sure then there'll be a follow-up with district metering. Am I correct, Mr. Allen? First step is having the actual water meters in place, and then the district metering will find out where the leaks are.
So there's plans for...
There's no point now at this point to stop the water meter program in its stage because you can't implement the second part with district metering.
So there's plans to invest a lot more into water metering and district metering then?
That's not the statement that was made.
Well,
No,
that's
Mr.
what
Mayor,
it sounds.
what we were